everybody, how is it going? Welcome to another episode of the Skeshbook podcast. We're back and we're back with a bang because we got a guest today. We've got a really cool artist who I've been wanting to talk to for a while right now. I've been inspired by his work, right from the beginning, and he was sort of a very big inspiration when I started out with my career. And, it's cool that I actually got to talk to him and also find out that he's such a nice human being. So who's that person, you might be wondering? Well, you might have found that person by now looking from the title. Anyways, that's none other than Derek Laufman. All right, so Derek Laufman, if you don't know, Derek Laufman is a professional artist / visual storyteller from Canada who's been in the industry for the past 18 plus years. He studied classical animation from Sheridan College, which led to his 10-year career in game development. And now he's a full-time freelance artist working out of his home for companies like Marvel, DC, Disney, Hasbro, Dreamworks, Rovio, and Mattel. Very small companies. I've heard they're very small companies. That's what I've heard. Anyways, Derek now has recently created his 5-issue comic series called RuinWorld that was published by Boom Studios in 2018, and also he self-published his own comic Bot 9 recently, and I happen to own both of them and I highly recommend them. Links are down below in the description. So in this podcast, right, we had a very long and a lengthy conversation about a whole bunch of things, right? Like from the start of Derek's career, how he went from college and how his career in game development panned out, and how that went, and also what did he learn from the process, and also what did he learn from the process of owning his own game development studio. I'm out of touch today, right? And we mainly talked about working on your craft, working on one's craft. How can one improve their craft, and how can one build a freelance career out of it? And how did he come up to sort of build his career in freelance? How did he go from, a sudden change from game dev to being able to work with companies like Marvel and Disney and Hasbro? And how did he build a social media following? And a lot of it was actually very, very simple. I think if you go through it, you'll sort of get it. And also, right, we talked about making comics, self-publishing. He was just a kind person, nice person at the end of the day, right? It took a while for us to sort of warm up. At least it took a while for me to sort of warm up, because we had some like audio technical difficulties at the start of the podcast. Well, hey, hooray! That's how things goes, right? And was such a nice person. I mean, I don't know. After the 2-hour conversation, I just went like, man, he's such a nice person. He's really willing to share things, right? He really wants to go in depth into what he has done, and he's able to sort of dissect things. He's able to share it and I learned a lot. Right? So hopefully this podcast is one informative thing for you as well, because it was a lovely conversation / informative session for me. And you know what? Let's jump right into it. I'll see you there inside the podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I'm so happy, and I've just finished. I got Bot 9 right a week and a half ago. Oh yeah, I freaking love this thing. It was just amazing.
Thank you.
You did a great job. I read it twice actually for me to actually get it. First, yes. I went through it, the whole thing. And after a while, I liked the story. And then I went through it again, like recently. Then I finally got the story, which I don't want to say because it'll sort of be like a sort of spoiler moment, right?
Right.
I don't want to do that. But man, I love the story, and I'm on to the next one right now.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, I love your work, Derek. I love your work. It's just beautiful. It's lovely. Anyways, enough of the flattery, right? So, what are you up to these days? What are you working on? What's exciting? What's exciting you?
Yeah, well, I'm working on my second art book, or my second art book in the creation series. So it's my second art book that contains just original art.
Oh yeah.
So my first 3 art books had a combination of original stuff and fan art. And then I started to, probably about 2 years ago, try to position myself away from fan art a little bit and work more on my own stuff, my own creations. Right. And it was just a conscious decision to sort of start building my own brands. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of thinking long term, like, the more IPs I build,
Mm.
the more like books I make that are my own. I can sell those forever. I don't have to worry about any legal issues. I don't have to worry about any of
True.
that stuff. Plus, the more IPs and brands I build, like RuinWorld or Bot9, like these are things that like hopefully will generate income later in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking kind of more like what do I have when I retire? If I only have a bunch of fan art that I really can't legally do things with, you
True.
know, it's like fan art got me popularity, but it's not going to give me longevity.
Uh-huh.
So that's sort of my thought process. So I'm focusing on more of my own creations. And if you follow me on social media, you'll see that shift has happened like over time. And certainly there's people that I'm sure kind of grumble because they came for the fan art, but and I don't
No,
necessarily
no,
give it to them as much. But
I don't think so. I mean, I sort of really like your transition right now. I mean, at least with Bot9 and Ruin World, at least that is something that I was following the when you were making Ruin World, right? When
mhm,
you were publishing issue from one to the fifth one,
yeah,
and you were posting concept art then. And from then it got exciting. I didn't sort of notice that transition from or at least I didn't, what do you say, miss that feeling of fan art, which
okay, good,
weirdly is the
good,
reason why I started following you actually around
right, yeah.
2015 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I figure like usually people come for fan art because I mean, the familiar stuff. If you see something I've created originally and you don't know who I am, I mean, you're less
Mm,
likely to sort of catch your eye, right? But
true.
if you've seen something I've done that you're familiar with, well, then that, you go, oh, who's this guy? And you go check him out. So fan art definitely has served a purpose in building my audience, for sure. And then it was a matter of, now that I have you, hey, how about looking at my original stuff? So that was sort of, how that's gone.
Is that always been your sort of approach to social media in general, meaning, or not just social media, putting your work out there? Or you like, you know what, we need to give something that the people want, and after they come in, maybe actually, you know what, now it's time for us to show some of our original work.
Right. I think that was my approach early on. It was certainly like a conscious decision to do fan art to bring people in. Like I definitely made
Mm.
that choice. And I leaned pretty hard into it when I first started on social media. It was a
Hmm.
lot of fan art. And I almost had a system and things were different back then. Algorithms were different. I was able to build an audience quicker on Instagram when I was able to jump on.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
and I think it was like 2000, let's say 11. I think I joined, but I really think I laid hard into it like around 2014.
All
And
right. Oh, wait. So you were
yeah,
that on Instagram, or was it Instagram
yeah, Instagram, yeah, yeah.
from
So
2011? Wow.
yeah, well, I didn't really do. I posted like pictures of my cat, like my first couple posts are like of my kid and like a cat. Like I didn't really use it. I had the account, but I didn't really use it. And
Uh-huh.
then I think it was Eric Canetti, who's an artist. He had
Hmm.
suggested that I get on there. And this was like back in like 2014. I was on Twitter mostly at the time, and he's like, "You really need to be on Instagram." And I hadn't really been paying a lot of attention to Instagram.
Uh-huh.
And then I kind of took his advice and I jumped on and it really took off after that. So I kind of got in at the right time, I think, and it helped sort of,
I
you
mean,
know,
but when I found you, when I found your work, I was one. It was really interesting, right? You were sort of making chibi versions of it. Nobody has seen that, at least at that time, right? I didn't see that, and I was really
well,
sucked at art back then, and I was like, oh boy, this is something where I like to sort of work myself up to. And I even
yes,
remember buying your used to sell PSDs, right, of the
yes,
Darth Vader thing.
yeah,
Yeah, I got that. I got that, and I was like going through the layers one by one. Okay, how did he do that? How did he do that?
yeah. Yeah,
Brings back some old memories. Anyway, sorry, go on.
yeah, actually, like speaking of chibi stuff, so chibi, I guess, was something that helped get me notoriety with people. And when I first started doing chibis, I didn't know what a chibi was. So the term was already used, but I didn't know what it was. I was used to doing video game sprites because I worked in video games for before that, it was about 7 years in video games before I started. Yeah. And so I was always drawing sprites, what I called sprites, characters that are like two heads. So it's like basically like if you think about Super Mario Brothers, like Mario is 2 heads tall. He's right. Yeah. So they did that back in the 8-bit days because you didn't have a lot of space. So you really needed to read the character's silhouette. They needed like a big feature so you could actually see their eye like in a pixel. You know what I mean? Like, so they really. So that whole 2 heads tall, 2.5 heads tall proportions sort of were, for video games. So that's sort of where Chibi had, I guess, evolved from. So then when I started doing my sort of sprite version of these characters I like, people are like, oh, you're drawing chibis. And I'm like, okay, I guess this is Chibi. And like Scotty Young was doing baby.
Baby versions of yes.
Yeah. So and he was doing that before I did my chibi stuff. And when I was thinking of mine, like I definitely didn't want to go into the baby side of things because he was already doing that. Right. So my idea was like, if I'm doing these as sprites, they're essentially just shrunk down versions of these characters, but I'm still keeping them more adult looking.
Right.
So
right.
That sort of became, I guess, more my thing. And then also like John Samariva was doing like similar stuff as well.
He's Red J. Yes. Yeah. I remember this. Yes.
Yeah. So, and he's even more extreme chibi than I am. Like he pushes that like.
Wait, he's the artist who does it very traditionally at the beginning, right? I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah, with all the clean pencil work.
Oh, he's fantastic.
He's so good at right. So right.
Yeah, I had him actually do cover art for my one of my first video games I made when I had my little video game company years ago. I hired him to do my box art because I was just such a fan of him. So so we go back a little ways, but so that's sort of the chibi thing, I guess, of how that got started.
And I want to sort of put things in context right here. So for people who are listening, right? So let's people know you from your days of you doing fan art, and now you're producing your own original work, Bot9, RuinWorld, and I see that you're working on another comic project, which I'm not.
Yeah, sort of. I have many projects cooking. I just haven't really settled on what I'm gonna do yet. Like I'm feeling out many different ideas.
Oh, well, I want to talk about that too. I don't know how you juggle so many projects. At least I understand, or from the looks of it, you seem to be juggling a lot of projects. Anyways, right? So people sort of know that your transition from this to your what do you say, your original work and your own IP right now.
Yes.
What about the days before that? How did it all start? How did it go? I know you studied classical animation at Sheridan.
Yes. Right. So when I got into classical animation, I actually wanted to get into illustration because I wanted to be a comic book artist. That was my goal when I was a teenager. I was going to draw comics for Image Comics. They were the hot thing at the time. And that was my goal. And then I couldn't get into illustration, but I was able to get into animation. And I guess my style at the time suited animation more. And I realized that once I kind of got into the program. But I was in this animation program, but I didn't want to be an animator.
But that's what I wanted to ask you. You wanted to be a comic artist, but you took up an animation program.
Right. So actually, once I was in the animation program, I was like, oh, I can use all these things they're teaching me and apply them to comics. They teach you about layout. They teach you about storyboarding, like character design, like all these things, expressions, like all these things are going to come into play when I start doing my comics, right? Like that's how I sort of started to look at it. And it was an interesting time too in the animation industry. The 2D stuff at the time had been sort of shoved to the side because Toy Story was popular and it was all going 3D. They had shut down. So Sheridan College is just outside of Toronto, and Toronto had closed down a 2D animation Disney studio that was working on like a Peter Pan animated movie. And so the industry was kind of in shambles once I was in school. because all these studios were shutting down.
So when was this actually? What year
This is,
approximately?
I want to think 2001,
Oh boy,
somewhere around
okay.
there, 2002.
Right.
Yeah. And it was interesting. Like Titan AE was a popular animated movie. Well, not popular. It became popular later, but came out, and then that studio shut down who worked on Titan AE. So there's a lot of industry professionals that were sort of flooded into the market. And now
Right.
we're having a graduating class that is just like, we don't know what we're doing. You're fresh out of school. You got all these professionals that are snapping up any job that comes. And so it was kind of in turmoil when I had graduated, and I wasn't hoping to get into animation anyway. I was going to do comic books. But around that time, the comic book industry was sort of tanking. Like, it wasn't as, they weren't selling as many issues. It was like, people weren't buying comics anymore.
Early 2000s?
Yeah, like it was ending. The bubble had burst on comics, sort of around that time. And so it was getting harder to get a job doing that. So funny enough, I ended up designing shoes at a shoe company that was like in Mississauga outside of Toronto, and doing graphic design and marketing for them. So it was a weird.
You design shoes, meaning design
Literally,
artworks that goes on shoes, or
no, I
literally
was
design shoes?
designing shoes. They weren't even like good shoes. It was like dress shoes, and it was like any job I could get that allowed me to do some drawing. I took. I took, right?
Yeah.
So that was sort of like, you're out of college, you have student loan debts. I had met my wife at that time, and we had she had worked at this company as like the shoe company. She was working there as what do you call it? Like the customer service. So she was doing customer service there. So she had seen they had this graphic design job open up, and she's like, you'd be perfect for it. So that's how I got into that. So it was such a weird, like, I'm in my like mid-20s. I'm working, I'm designing shoes. I hate it. Like, I hate the job.
You just went from comic book artist to product designer.
Yeah, and I hated it. I was miserable. I was miserable. I was so miserable. I think after like 3 years there, the CEO realized I wasn't liking my job. It was probably the best thing that happened to me at the time. He let me go. He's like, I don't see this as like a future for you here, and you're not happy. And I'm like, you're right. I'm not happy. And it was the best thing he did, because that forced me to sort of go find other work. And then I found a video game job at a company called Big Blue Bubble. It's in London, Ontario. So that's how I ended up in London, Ontario. I went to work for this Big Blue Bubble, worked there for 5 years. And that sort of got me at least doing more artwork that I enjoyed. So it was a good sort of like push me back into artwork that at least it's video games, it's fun, that kind of thing. So it rejuvenated my art career at that time.
Right there. So this is where, at least from what I saw, things got interesting. When this is the part I was really wanted to talk, I wanted to talk to you about, right? So once you were out of the game studio,
yes,
right? How was that? What were you doing at the game studio?
So
and you got to draw more, obviously. And
yes, I was wearing a lot of hats. It was a smaller company. When I left, I think they were about 50 employees, but when I started, it was I think it was like the 17th employee. You wore a lot of hats. It was interesting. I was getting to do producing of games. I was designing games. I was, I was writing for games. There was a lot of different things I had to do there. But the game industry was sort of shifting. When I first started, we were doing GBA and Nintendo DS games, and then it shifted to casual Flash games were the thing at the time, where you play games on your PC, and they were geared to
Flash or something.
Yeah, they were geared towards older women were playing at the time, like middle-aged, like 40 up. So we started working on games that sort of, work towards them. And to be honest, at the time, I was struggling with that, because it wasn't something I was necessarily interested in making anymore. And that was the last couple of years of my time there became a struggle, because I just wasn't as involved with the games the way I wanted to be. Like I wasn't hyped about it, right? Like it didn't get me excited.
Right.
So I started to lose my enthusiasm for making games for them. and I knew I needed to just break away and go do something else.
So it was all these years around. So 2001, approximately, you got out of college, and
Got out of college, yeah.
and you went into the shoe designing business,
Yes.
and then the game development business.
So I was around 30. Yeah, around 30 years old. I got into video games, and then I think I was about 35 when I left there. And then I did some freelance work. I eventually ended up starting another company with a friend of mine. We did that for like 3 years. And that was a struggle because you're an indie development studio. We were a programmer.
Oh, wait, you started your own game development studio?
Yes. I had a company called
Halfbot. Okay, right. See,
yeah.
I knew about it. Wait, so it was game development studio. I thought you guys did illustration work.
No. That was our video game studio. So, yeah, we didn't have a lot of success, to be honest. It was passion projects. It was a lot of late nights and not a lot of money. And luckily, my wife had a good job at the time in supporting me. And while I was trying to make this whole video game thing work, yeah, it was fun.
Oh boy! I think that was sure. I mean, I thought I was like, wow, he started a studio. I really thought you guys like went full into illustration. And
okay, no.
It was like, okay, wait, how did that go? Right? So you're done with that.
Yes.
And then I'm assuming, so then after that, you went into freelancing, and that's when the years of Instagram started for you.
Yes. So it was sort of at the tail end of Halfbot. The last year, I realized like Halfbot was struggling, and I needed money. So it was, I had a kid on the way, my first kid.
Right.
And so that was a motivator. I needed to start doing more freelance work. Right. So one of the first jobs I did as a big project as a freelancer was I worked for Sean Galloway. So yes. So I had been friends with him just through message boards back in the day. We used to all post our artwork on message boards. That was before social media.
Right.
And, so I knew him from that. I knew him from DeviantArt. We had met once at San Diego Comic-Con, where it was interesting to see. I was on the side of the desk where I had a product I was trying to promote, and he was like the up and coming artist who had his portfolio. It was a funny thing, like just to see that transition. Was just when I first met him, he was just up and coming, and to watch his little trajectory, like he started off, I think he started drawing late 20s, or mid to late 20s. He started his art. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He worked so hard, and he just skyrocketed past me. I watched him just he got so good so fast. It was crazy.
He couldn't even notice, right? I mean, now that you're telling me that, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. You should have him on. He's a really interesting story. So,
definitely.
And so anyway, he was working on a book called World of Warcraft: Pearls of Pandora. And it was a graphic novel. It was 120 pages, and he had brought me on to do layouts because it was sort of like he had sort of set up like an art studio, almost like you would make an animation. He had like a background artist, cleanup artist, layout artist, like I was doing, laying out the books and stuff. So that was the first thing I got to do after college, where I was back in comics, sort of doing comics again. So it was it ignited that spark again for me. And he had originally brought on 3 people to do layouts, but I had turned mine in really quick, my first set. And he's like, he really liked them. He's like, do you want to just do the whole thing? And I was like, sure, that'd be great. And
what project was this on?
So that was the World of Warcraft Pearls of Pandora.
Right. Okay. So you
so he's like, do you want to lay out? Yeah, he's like, do you want to lay out the entire book? And I was like, okay. So it was great. And I was a big fan of World of Warcraft at the time, and so it sort of all fit. And that was a fun project. So it was a crash course in comics again, sort of like to reignite, because 120 pages. I had to figure out shots, and it was essentially storyboarding the comic, right?
Right. Wait, just hold it right there. So
yes,
put it into perspective for me, right?
Yes.
you finished out now. This is right out of you are being done with your game studio.
No,
Have
I'm still at my game studio at this time. So
oh, so sort of like
I'm juggling both.
right.
Yeah, a lot of late nights. It was a lot of weekends, late nights. My career from like, I would say 35 to probably 42, which is like a year ago. I was doing like 7 years of like almost every single day working, probably 10 to 12 hours a day. Like it was just,
Right.
I was just getting after it. Like it's,
Or 10
it's
to 12
like,
hours of drawing.
yeah,
Oh man.
yeah, yeah. It was intense.
Oh man. Oh man.
It was
My
intense.
arm, my wrist would fall off.
Yeah, no, it was tough. It was tough. But at the time, I was like I'd said, I had a kid on the way. I
Mhm.
was trying to juggle multiple projects. I was, I had my game studio. I'm trying to do freelance work. It was, it was a struggle. It was a struggle for sure. And, but it was good. I mean, it taught me discipline. It, it set me up to do freelance like now, like, you know what I mean? Like all that hard
Right.
work and work ethic. I don't think I had that same work ethic before that. It sort of
Uh-huh.
forced me to sort of get my priorities straight.
Right.
Because as a freelancer, you're your own boss, and you have
Mm.
to you get back what you put into it. So you really
Mhm.
have to, if you take it easy, like at the beginning, it's just not going to work. Like you need to put the work in to
Yes.
get the
Oh,
career going.
sure.
And so yeah, so that's sort of like that was the first thing I had done sort of like as a freelancer. And then I end up doing freelance design for another game company called Emerald City Games that were in Vancouver. And I was doing that still at the tail end of HalfBot. So it was a lot of like
Uh-huh.
juggling during my HalfBot time.
Right.
And
At the end of it, I'm assuming.
yeah, the last year of HalfBot, I was still working with this company. And then I worked for them for about another year after I left HalfBot. But at that time was sort of when I started putting up my chibi stuff, and
Right.
that's when Marvel and Hasbro took notice of
Right.
in a good way.
Right.
And so that sort of transitioned me more. And then once I got Hasbro and Marvel to hire me, then it was like my freelance career is finally
Taken
doing
off.
yeah, it's taken off, right? So that
Well, wait. So what was your mindset like, right, when you were working in jobs that you were not exactly very passionate about, or probably you didn't like doing so much because you
Mm,
wanted to do something else, and
yes,
during the phases of transition where you were like you had this vision of where you wanted to be a freelancer
yes,
who probably wants to work for themselves, doing their own projects,
yeah.
IP. I'm assuming because that's what at least what I wanted to do when I went through my transition at least. What was your mindset like, and what were, say, some of the little steps? I know you obviously started putting work out there, right, that other people wanted to see.
Yes, yes.
What was going on? What were, say, some things that you were doing? What was going on in there, right? In
Okay, well,
mindset wise, at least,
yeah, well, I'd say like so when I was at the end of Big Blue Bubble,
right?
that
Because it's your
mindset
own.
was
I mean, so Big Blue
no,
Bubble was a game that Half-Butt was your
that's
own company, though.
right. So I
It
was
was
saying, yeah,
been,
so the
yeah,
big when I was working for Big Blue Bubble, my mindset at the end of that was desperation because I was just desperate to do my like I needed to get out. Like it was like that I felt
right,
trapped. I
right,
felt trapped and I said to my wife like I literally quit like where I didn't have any severance package. I didn't have like I had nothing, but I was just like I have to do this. Like I just it was this like it had built up probably for like a year and I'm like I
right,
just need to break like and it was like that leap almost at the time was like it was risky. It was are we going to have enough income? So
right.
it was tough. It was a tough decision, but I think having that fear
Mm-hmm.
motivated me to at least gave me more drive to like go and make more art. I wasn't working when I was at Big Blue Bubble. I was coming
Mm-hmm.
home and I was watching TV. I was exhausted. I didn't work on my own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't draw for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was drained at the end of the day, and I didn't like the feeling. I wasn't drawing
Right.
I
No, no,
wasn't
no. Yeah, yeah.
feeling that need to draw for myself. And I think that was part of the problem. And that was what led up to me just having to leave. It built up. If I was probably drawing for myself at the time more, I might not have felt that same urge to just break away.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But I think, so I think that's what it was. And then, for that, and then for when I made the next transition to really get into freelance after, like during HalfBot, it was just like, I knew, I think at that point I was seeing more clearly. I just knew that I needed to start earning more money. I needed to, I had the kid, and it was a different mindset at that point. It was more mature. I just knew that like there was a path over here where I can make more money consistently if I'm freelancing. I was putting my artwork out there. It was starting to get noticed. I wasn't necessarily thinking at the time that it was going to get me more work. It wasn't, that wasn't what I was thinking. It was just, I was doing it out of necessity to draw for myself, and focusing more on that. And that was making me happy. So I did it more. And then that just sort of eventually transitioned into me getting more freelance work. So it was almost like the perfect little, scenario that I didn't know what I was doing. Like, really I didn't. I like to think that I had a plan and I followed it, but I didn't. I was just, at that point I had to draw for myself.
Right.
And,
and
so
it's sort of actually similar for me. And obviously I didn't, for me at least, I didn't spend that many years in a job. It was, but I can relate to that sense of desperation, right? You just wanted to get out and you want to start your thing. Probably, I wasn't I'm way younger than you, by the way, but obviously way less experienced than you. But one advantage that I had was probably I lived in India. I had to make way less money to actually, do my own thing. So that was something. Anyway, but the sense of desperation was very high at the end of my job. So you started putting out your work, and it doesn't happen to a lot of people, but obviously you were really good at your craft and you put out something that was very different, which is something that people actually need to take notice. And Marvel and Hasbro contacted you, and from then your freelance career took off. So from that point on, how did you approach your freelance career? How did you make sure the gigs were coming in, the jobs were coming in, and how did you plan things out? Or was it like a lot of this like trial and error? Let's smash my face against the wall. We'll see what's going to happen. How did it go?
Right. So, it was weird. Okay. So I think I started drawing chibis probably a little more than a year before Marvel and Hasbro had hired me.
Right.
And then it was basically about a year. I think I was at about 40,000 followers around the time when they took notice.
There was a lot back then, wasn't it?
That was a lot back then. I was,
it's still a lot right now.
Yeah, no, I was very grateful for it. And, it was funny. They had contacted me within a week of each other. Totally separate. It was just a weird thing. I don't know. And then it was, my career after that, like I didn't have to look for work. Like it was like they had plenty of work coming my way, both those two companies. And then it just seemed like, I don't know what it was, maybe osmosis or something. Like it was just the work started coming. I was getting to the point, like by that summer, I was turning people down, like I'm just like, I can't take on any more. And, I'd say probably for the next 2 years after that, it was consistent work. Like Hasbro had me designing, I think within that first year, I ended up doing, they had a series of toys called Mighty Mugs. They were revamping their Mighty Mugs line. So they're kind of like, they were like their answer to Funko Pop.
I'm so out of touch with that. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So, and
Funko Pop, was it?
Funko Pop was the hot toy at the time. It's still, I guess, people collect it still. But this was the Hasbro answer to Funko Pop. And so I worked on these toys. I designed probably like almost 100 different characters. And it was like, you know, from Star Wars to Marvel, Transformers. Like I was doing all these brands. It was awesome. It was like kid in a candy store. It was so much fun. And so
that's where all the chibi. The little. Let's stop calling it chibi because it's sort of.
You know what? I'll get one. I'll show you. Hold on.
Yeah, sure. Oh boy, that'd be nice.
They're little.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that was my student. Don't worry about it.
So,
oh boy, I know these. All right, I didn't know the names for these things.
And you like pop their heads, and then I had to do like that's actually my artwork on the expressions. Like they actually took my artwork and put them on there.
Sorry, can you do that again?
Yeah, so it gives different expressions.
Oh boy. I have I have knockoffs of these things.
Oh, do you?
I couldn't get the original ones.
So yeah, that was a big part, like, you know, so that was part of that 2-year span of like having constant work. And it was great for my career. It was great financially.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was also doing, for Marvel, I was doing their superhero adventures was their toddler line. So they had like, you know, any kind of like age 5 and under toy from like Marvel had these like, you know, that was branded with superhero adventures, had my artwork on the packaging and all that stuff. So that was a neat thing to see. Like I'd go to the toy store with my kids and I'd see my artwork on the shelf. So
you were living the dream then, right?
Yeah, it was
getting
cool.
to draw a lot, and for IPs that you like,
it was amazing. It was great. And then DC had hired me probably like a year and a half after that to do a Super Friends like line that looked different. Because I told them at the time, I'm like, are you aware I'm doing the toddler stuff for Marvel? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. We're going to do like a slightly different version. You know, I did a totally different version for that.
Right.
So that was cool. It was like, I was just like, I don't know, I was in heaven. Like, you know, for freelance career, it was about as good as I could ever hope. It was.
So wait. The thing is, I mean, I'm trying to phrase this question right. So yes. I want to phrase this properly, right? I know you do come off like someone, hey, wait, I don't know what I was doing. I was just throwing darts. And all of a sudden, I'm doing work with Marvel, DC, Warner Bros, and DreamWorks, right?
Yeah.
But I feel from the outsider's perspective, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like you were really good at your craft for one. That is non-negotiable. At least that's what I think. That's what my mindset is. That always the craft always comes first, and after that, when you put it out there, obviously, and at the right time, right place, with hopefully a lot of luck, good things come your way. So my question would be, or I don't want to ask you like question. What do you think? What do you do? What's your approach in terms of your craft? I mean, you're really good at it.
Well, thank you.
And what do you do? How did you go from say where you were when you passed out of college? And I'm obviously sure you're way better right now.
Yes, way better. Yeah, I was horrible back then. I know that.
I didn't mean it like that.
No, it's true. No, it's, you know, here's the funny thing. So when I was in college, I thought I was great. I thought I was awesome. I wasn't, but I was immature. Like I had a big head because, you know, you get into, you know, you go from like, okay, I might have been the best artist like in my group of friends, right? And then I was like one of the top artists in the art class. And then I was like, you know, I get into this animation program where 5,000 people apply and they only take like 100. So, you know, like you almost like, it's weird. Like at that age, I started to have like a bit of a weird ego, but the thing was, it blinded me because I was not good. Like my fundamentals were poor. Like I had poor fundamentals. I almost ignored fundamentals because I didn't think I needed them. You know, it was almost like I'd go back and I would kick myself. Like if I could go back, I would be so much better today if I would have been more self-aware back then.
Meaning
Like,
focusing on the
like
right things.
if I was focusing on the right things, I pushed my ego aside,
Right.
and it was interesting because the ego left once I was out of college and I'm struggling and I'm doing all these other things I don't want to be doing, like designing shoes and stuff. It almost humbled me back
Mm-hmm.
into, and then as I matured, like I feel like I matured late, like, because it probably into my 30s when I finally realized like where my flaws were. And once I realized where my flaws were and I could see them,
Right.
then I could focus on getting better. And I think that's when I started to actually improve, is when I realized, okay, I don't draw volumes very well. And like
Uh-huh.
my perspective isn't great, and my line quality isn't, like, and my colors aren't good. And like, it's like I could start to see like where my gaps were and where
Right.
I needed to focus. And I think that's, the young artists that you see nowadays, like who grew up with YouTube tutorials and everything like that, you can see this like the level of talent for young kids. Like it's remarkable, right? They have so many more tools and the ones that have the art maturity to see
Mm-hmm.
where they need to improve, like those kids, you see them and they're just like, amazing. Like,
Mm.
and I'm jealous of that, because when I was their age, I was, in my own head and like thinking I'm great and don't need to practice or don't need to do this or
Mm.
don't need to learn anatomy and I don't need to, it's
You know,
like,
we can sort of, skip by using this style or something, right?
yeah, you start to think like that, that, oh, that's my style. You
All
say
right.
that,
Right.
oh,
Definitely.
I draw this wrong because it's my style.
It's
And I
conscious.
yeah, and I think the difference was like when I started doing my chibi stuff, like I had by that point learned enough of the fundamentals that like
Mm.
when I was breaking rules, I knew why I was breaking them or how to break them properly.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I don't think I couldn't have done that when I was younger because I didn't understand the rules. So like if you don't understand the rules, you can't break them. You can't break them properly.
True. Very true.
So
Very true.
I think that's why I try to encourage people when they say like, what should I do? What should I work on? And almost every single time, no matter what level you're at, it's almost like go back to those fundamentals, because those fundamentals are key foundation to like your rest of your art career. And so
Mm.
many people skip them because, they're maybe not exciting, to learn those things. And you want to make the pretty drawing right away. Like
Very
that's
true.
your goal, right? I want the pretty drawing that looks like the guy I like. I like his art. I want to draw just
Draw
like
like
him.
that. Right.
I want to draw like that. And it's like, it doesn't really work that way. You might be able to make something that looks okay,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
it's kind of like that saying, like you put lipstick on a pig, like, and it's, that might be harsh, to say, but it's the
No.
truth. Like, it's just,
You're spot on. You're spot on, and
you know,
you're so right. I mean, that's actually what's been going on in my mind actually for the past week. I have I'd like to think I have a decent base of fundamentals, but I think from all the artists I look up to, I see your work, right? Like I'm going, okay, I really need to work on a couple of say weak points that I have that I'm sort of say bypassing in the name of style and stylistic choice. It's like, you know what, let's just draw that instead of maybe doing it the actual way it's supposed to be done. Maybe after
right.
that, like you said, right, once we probably learn that, we can actually go ahead and break the rules. And what would you say, like what are say some of the fundamentals thing that you focus on, meaning
Okay.
say.
So yeah, for me, like, it's volumes when it comes to characters. It's understanding the
Mm,
three-dimensional shapes that exist
mm,
within a 2D character.
right.
So even though it's 2D and it's flat, I still need to visualize. And it's like it
Right.
takes, sort of like, especially at the beginning when you're learning, you really got to think about it. And you
Mm,
have to draw those shapes, drawing through a character. So like when you are drawing like the character's like torso, when you're
mm-hmm,
doing your rough pass, like make sure you draw the whole volume through and
mm-hmm,
understand how that arm connects to that volume.
mm,
That was something that I, going back to Sean Galloway, when I worked with him,
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with him on a few other things like that were side projects to that comic thing. And I watched him, and this was probably why he advanced so quick. His
Mm-hmm.
understanding of volume, like in a character, is like it's almost like uncanny. Like his ability to see volumes, like and
Uh-huh.
visualize them. I was just like I knew it somewhat, but then when I see him do it, I'm like, wow. Like, and if you go
Right.
look at his work, he has a lot of like rough drawings that you'll see in
No, no,
his
yeah,
in his
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
and you can see him drawing through his volumes, and it's so important to understand how that works. And
Right.
and that once you understand those volumes, I mean, that really comes into play when you're designing a character that has like a big round belly and like little stout legs, and understanding how it all fits together,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or those type of things. So I think having that to understand how like what shapes make up a character or your character, how those
Mm-hmm.
shapes they look in a three-dimensional space. You almost have to envision it, and you can kind of sketch it through to understand. And then with the volumes comes perspective. So you need to understand
Mm.
perspective when you're drawing those volumes, because
True.
if you're trying to draw like a cube, and in your character, if you don't understand perspective, that cube's everywhere. Like, or you don't understand how those planes look in that space. So I think like volume and perspective are two key things as the
Mhm.
foundation when you're designing a character, or even like designing a building or a prop. Like
Mhm.
understanding those two fundamentals is huge.
And
That's
yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say, like, that is sort of like I sort of equate it to, if you're going to build your house, you want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure your foundation is
Is right.
strong, your walls are built correctly, or your whole nice house, you could paint it, you could put up the wallpaper and everything, but the whole thing will collapse
Mm-hmm.
if the foundation isn't strong underneath. You know what
Right.
I mean?
No, no,
So
yeah, I get.
that's kind of how I want people to think when they're doing their drawings, and spend the time learning how to do the the foundation of your drawing. Like spend a year, 2 years working on that. Like, don't worry
Mm.
about making it look pretty. Worry about making a strong understanding of what that foundation is. And I think
Mm.
that's if I go back to my younger self, I'd kick him and say, like, learn this stuff now. Like, focus on this. Don't worry about trying to make a nice drawing, that looks cool.
Yeah.
You don't understand how that really fits together. You just kind of do the cool, like, sword, or you do the cool thing and try to make the character look cool, and you're
Right.
hiding and masking the weak foundation underneath your
Oh boy.
drawing. Because I used to do that. Like, you add stuff to your drawing and stuff like that. And part of it, I think that I grew up idolizing comic artists, and back
Mm-hmm.
in the 90s with Rob Liefeld and all these guys who are flashy, but the structure to their drawings wasn't really quite
Good.
there.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But I learned from them, like watching copying their work, and I think that was probably bad. You know what I mean? Like,
No, no, yeah, yeah.
I should have had a proper art book, not a comic book to learn from.
No, I think cartooning, or the kind of style that you do, and sort of also I do. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the whole idea of bringing, say, core drawing and art fundamentals into that field has been relatively new. At least that's what I feel. Back in the day with the old comic artists, they were really, what do you say? They were really focused on telling the story over the artwork. At least that's my
Yes.
observation, maybe.
Yeah, or just making it look flashy, like adding a lot of
Right,
detail.
right, yeah.
It was detail heavy. Um, yeah, and so like I think that's things have transitioned now, and like I said before, like with people, younger people having the YouTube videos, tutorials, like your
Mm,
classes that you teach and stuff like that. Like, that kind of
mm,
content is out there now. We didn't
mm.
have that. Like, when I was coming up, we didn't have that. I had How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. That was the only book I had. You know,
Oh, yeah.
that
Is
was
it,
it.
it
Like,
mm,
I had an aunt who was like a traditional artist, and she'd given me this book on like how to draw like properly. It was a nice, really nice art book.
mhm.
How to draw, and I ignored it. Like, she gave it to me when I was like 17, and I
It's
didn't really
boring to
look
look
at it.
at, right?
It's
I mean,
boring. Yeah, no, and I didn't want to read.
right?
Like, I just I could just go look at my comic and try to draw Spawn, like, or whatever. Like, it was like,
Oh, I get that so much.
but I was immature, right? And that's part of the maturity I talk about. Like, it's just, I was immature back then. I skipped I tried to jump ahead. You know what I mean? You try to, it's a laziness. Like I had a laziness to me,
Right.
I didn't want to do the work. I wanted to just be good. Like, I didn't want to do the work to get good. I just wanted to be good. And if I could sort of make it look good, that's good enough.
That's right.
Like, if it's passable and my friends think it's cool, and you're getting that sort of like, praise.
Right now it's like a lot of likes on Instagram. We're good to go.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's so now it's Instagram. If you're getting the likes, well, what am I doing wrong? Right. I'm not doing anything wrong. Like, I'm doing it all right. And you see, like, there's plenty of artists out there that have huge followings. You kind of look at their art and you're like, they're really lacking in fundamentals. It can do something that looks pretty, and the average person doesn't know the difference. But and they can make a career out of it. Like, there's plenty of, like, there's avenues to make money, like, YouTube stars and different things, and you can figure it out. You can probably get by if you have a good personality, and you can talk, and you can do you can almost like take your average art skill and sort of ramp it up.
Yeah, I get
that. You build a brand around it, and different things like that, and which is fine. Like, I mean, that's some people do that to great success. So but for the people that sort of, it's kind of like the way I looked at those comic artists. There are new people coming up going like, oh, this person doesn't draw that great, but they're doing really well. So that's all the level I have to get to too. And you think that's that's a danger, because it's like you're going to skirt the education of drawing and just go like, oh, if I can just do this same thing that this guy's doing, I'll be successful. But honestly, you're selling yourself short, because at the end of the day, if you have the fundamentals, who knows where your career is going to go as an artist.
True.
But if you have those fundamentals, no matter where your career goes, whether you're a YouTube star or whether you're drawing for Marvel, like, if you have those fundamentals, it'll help sort of like make sure that you at least can make a career out of this later.
And we're living in an age, or I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, at least my observation, right? So I've started out with YouTube. I put out artwork so that I can build myself a following, so that hopefully it's my pathway to, say, independence, or being an independent thing. Well, and slowly over time, say, first I started very approximately around 2011, 2010. I was very young as well back then, and I really lacked those fundamentals, because one, I didn't go to an art school, and two, it wasn't until, say, a couple of years into me doing what I was doing, putting out work and putting out things, I realized that there was this stagnation, in the sense, you're not an artist, but rather you're sort of an entertainer who draws things in order to attract people. You get what I'm saying? Sort of an artist entertainer. You're not an artist per se, right? You're not working on the craft. You're rather trying to work your craft around the entertainment, so that you get a lot of views, you get a lot of likes, and that's a whole different conversation.
Well, not like, I mean, you can equate that to the same thing when I was doing my fan art, because the fan art became that. It was like I started doing fan art for me later. I was doing fan art because my fans were liking it. I was getting those likes, and I was there was definitely a period of time where I know I'm drawing this for you guys out there, not for me. That's sort of like, I think that you're trying to feed the beast of like social media, and and that works up to a point, and some people do that. I've seen artists that do that, and they seem happy, and they continue to do it, and it builds their brands, and that's great. Like, I mean, if that's what you like and it works for you, I mean, who am I to say, like, but for me, like, I want to get better. that's my thing. Like when I started to mature as an artist and I could see my flaws, my goals were I realized I'm never going to be satisfied with where I'm at. And I'm okay with that. I just want to level up. I want to change, I want to evolve. And that's something I focus on now. I'm trying to always evolve my style, and you know, even if it's not necessarily a shift that is more technically sound. Sometimes it's pulling it back a little bit, simplifying things, or
Right.
I just want to explore more things as an artist. And I feel like now that I have the following and I have more of an established career, I can afford. I feel like I can afford to do that now. I can explore more. I can experiment more. I can take more risks now.
Right.
I didn't feel like that when I was doing fan art and I was trying to build my social media following. I didn't feel like I had that same freedom. I would post something original. Like when I first started doing RuinWorld, I would get like 10% of the likes that I would get for my fan art. And that was a tough thing at the time. It was
Right. No, I
you know
get
what
that.
I mean? Like
Yeah,
when you post that thing and then people are like, and you're like, okay. But it almost took me a little while to get over that, to get over that, hump. And then as I transitioned away from fan art, I found that my work was starting to get the same likes as my fan art was. And now like it's almost surpasses my fan art.
Oh, it was a transition. I mean, literally.
Right. It was,
Ah,
it was
that's
like
good news.
yeah, so that was nice. Like, it was nice to sort of see that, because I was worried when I sort of made these decisions to focus away from fan art. I was worried. I'm like, am I going to sell less of my product on my website? Am I going to, get less likes, get less jobs, get less? It's like I found that like I get other jobs, like I get more design jobs started coming my way, where it was designing more original characters. Like I found like because I had a following and my artwork's out there. And yeah, so I think that that's just sort of it's interesting to see. It's not necessarily something I 100% plan or know if it's going to work, but it has been a positive swing, so that's good. Like I'm glad to see that it's finally catching up. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I get that. I'm starting to push my own project, or at least like to think in terms of projects. At least that's what I've been noticing. What other people, and you especially, also doing, right? You're thinking in terms of projects. You're making projects, and you're sharing the process of it, and you're putting things out there, and people who are really interested, and they like go ahead and like they buy it, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's a great exercise for people that want to sort of create a project instead of just doing a one-off drawing. Think about it in terms of a project, even if it's not something you're going to necessarily take to a RuinWorld or Bot 9 level of print. Like maybe it's just and I've been doing this more lately with the thought of my art book in mind. It's like I have my art book, I need content for my art book. So if I start thinking about like, if I draw a character, it's like, oh, what does that character's friends look like? What does the villain look like? What sort of, world do they live in? And I start drawing those things. And even if it doesn't become anything, it definitely helps fuel my creativity, around that character, around that. And it start to build a little world. And then it just gives me more content to pull from when I'm trying to think about what I'm going to do next. I think it's been really helpful. Like, I've been doing that for the past like year. And it was sort of like, it sort of stemmed from doing RuinWorld. Like when the RuinWorld started, I wasn't necessarily planning on doing a full comic. I was just trying to get myself back into drawing comics. And, and it was a weird, like I was trying to scratch an itch to get back into comics. And I wanted to do my own. I had never written anything before. I was always really scared to write something. I considered myself an artist before a writer, and because I didn't write a lot. And so RuinWorld was sort of my dive into that. It was like the first page in the first book, that's the first thing I drew. I didn't know what the story was going to be. I had no idea. I just drew these two characters in front of this keep. And yeah, you can probably show the first page.
Oh yeah, this
so
particular illustration.
Page. Yeah, and that was just me trying to establish, like, I think I wrote the sample dialogue. I think it changed a little bit once I finally got it to a point where it was going to be published. But it was an interesting sort of like dive into back into comics. I'm going to just try this thing. I'm going to see how it goes, and I'll draw a page, and then I'm like, I'll draw 10 pages. And I'll just kind of see. And then once I kind of got there, I was like, okay, I think I have something here. And then I was able to like go and, I did a full issue of it. And then when I had the full issue,
120 pages, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And so once I had that first issue, it was huge. Yeah. And I was doing that while I was juggling, the Marvel and Hasbro stuff. That's what I said. Yes, yeah, that's what I said. During this period of time for 7 years stint, I was working weekends and 10, 12-hour days every day. And it took its toll. But so like just to sort of like, when you start to draw like, something, it's like if you can kind of think broader in terms of like a bigger project, sometimes it can evolve into something that's bigger than what you thought it was going to be. Like it can evolve into a whole graphic novel. It can, who knows? Like, it could become a cartoon one day or whatever. Like, the thing you start to create. I've seen a lot of artists create their own characters and they start building worlds around them. I think that's something I'm trying to do more of myself now, is like build those worlds and sort of start to explore them more. And, it's more fulfilling.
I'm so sorry.
Take another drink.
No, I'm trying to sort of.
The worst is when you're trying to like hold in a cough.
Oh boy, yeah. That's what I was doing. Right.
Just let it out.
Oh, you're saying something interesting. I was like, oh, okay, wow, really want to talk about this.
Yeah, but you're like, I'm gonna cough right now.
Oh, that's the part where you're like, oh boy, I want to listen to this, but I'm holding my cough.
Trying not to.
I'm so busy holding my cough. I'm so sorry.
Don't apologize. That's why I've been drinking this whole thing the whole time, because I get dry mouth, and when I'm yapping,
Wait, what is that?
Or it's tea. I make a giant tea twice a day. There's just two. I put like 2 orange pico tea bags in there.
Is that a way for you to sort of stay full?
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's a good, like, I find like it wakes me up in the morning, and then I usually have another one in the evening to sort of keep me awake until midnight. So
you draw a lot. You know what? I really want to get into this, right? I want to talk about this more, RuinWorld.
Okay.
Because I feel like I really love these two so much. Okay. I'm not trying to flatter you. Trust me. That's the last thing I like to do, or I hate doing that. The thing is, when I got your art book, right, I was just holding them weirdly. This one.
Yes.
The first one is at my house, right? So I just keep one in the studio and one at my house, so that whenever I feel like it, and I just like flip through it, and I like hold it. I have a book fetish, so don't get weird.
No, I have a ton of books.
Right? And then I do the same with RuinWorld these days. It's like I'm like, I don't want to finish this right now, because if I finish it, I'll lose that feel for it. Anyways, I'm halfway into the first chapter, so I want to get into RuinWorld. Before that, I just want to ask you like one last thing, which is regarding craft, right? We talked a lot about fundamentals and how important it is, and how people actually need to be working on that. I went really hard at my fundamentals like a couple of years back. It's like it paid off in so much compounded interest, right?
Yes.
You're really good at telling stories. At least that's what I got from Bot9. Because when I saw it on your website, when I went through the first 2 pages, and I'm a guy who doesn't read comics. I'm not a comics guy, and I'm trying to get into comics, and I make more comics than I read, actually. So that's what I do.
No, I understand. I'm sort of like that as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm coming from the cartoons, the visual moving pictures, the world of moving pictures. And I saw Bot 9 and the way you presented that, and especially shot. I geek out a little bit right here, so don't get weirded out again. So it's like the shot where when the old man sort of has the can up on top of the tower with the fish in it, right? And he pulls it. And it's like, that was like, I need to get this book right there. That was like sort of the decision for me.
Right, nice.
How do you think about storytelling? Because I feel like storytelling is very, very important. Obviously, the technicality of the craft is crucial, but you also seem to have this vast visual library of, things that you want to draw. Like also the new things that you're drawing these days, which is these little houses and huts or stores.
Yes.
Oh yeah, all these things. How do you build up that visual library, before we get into RuinWorld? How do you do that?
So, I mean, visual library, like I find that like creating a mood board. Have you ever created a mood board?
Oh, tons.
So, so like that I find is key. Like when I'm starting to visualize a project, the more images I can pull to sort of like, just even if it's not necessarily something I'm going to go look at again, I build a folder of these things, or sometimes I'll actually just take the images and I'll paste them on a big, like, sheet in Clip Studio and just to have as a point of reference when I'm going back, because it's just, understanding kind of trying to like mold the visuals in my head through multiple images.
Right.
I think that's the thing. If I just start blank, I mean, it feels like, and I have started blank on many concepts and different things. And, I find that like the percentages of me actually creating something good when I start from nothing is so much smaller than if I do a little bit of research, I grab a bunch of things, I, like when I'm doing those shops that I started doing, I would grab just a bunch of different shots of, I go on Pinterest, I look up like cool European bakery or something, and I would just grab, a bunch of images, and I'd have like, maybe 20 images of cool different bakery, and it would just sort of start to visualize in my head a little more, and I'd have little things I could look at for like, because I don't have the visual language of necessarily architecture always in my head. Characters I find are a little easier because I do it more. I have a little bit more of that visual sort of like, it's more automatic, I guess. But when it comes to architecture and things, I don't draw like that, like a crazy amount of background. So I definitely need to do the research ahead of time if I'm going to have a successful sort of illustration in the end, you know what I mean? So it's just doing the research, really. Like that's, if you're going to be drawing something that you're not all that familiar with, the more research you can do. Sometimes I get it. Sometimes I can find it gets out of hand. Like if I'm on Pinterest, sometimes I'll waste a whole afternoon, 3 hours looking at, and
I'm
it's
not
just,
there yet. Yeah, I'm not. I cannot relate to that because I know that's a pitfall. I keep hearing that, right? People, everyone, telling me, don't get into that trap. So like, what? I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah, but it's still like, I mean, I find that it ultimately is helpful. And mine is if I get off on a tangent, if I happen to be looking on Pinterest, especially if I'm looking at like concept art, you'll see an artist and I'll be like, oh, who's this artist? And I'll go check out their art station and then I go down a rabbit hole like, who are they following? And I'm like, I'll be like, who's that guy following? Like, who's influencing that guy? And then I go and look. And so I find that like,
you do that too?
Be the bad.
You go around, check who your people are following.
100%. That's my sort of secret to
secret
find.
Sauce.
I wanted to see, because I want to see, if I think your work is good, I want to see who you're following, who's influencing you, or who do you find good, and and I find that's a great way to find other artists. So yeah. Anyway, that's
So how did this come about then? How does 120 pages of monstrosity, because I go through the artworks, I'm like, holy crap. And for people to know, just for people's understanding, in what time frame did you finish this?
Okay, so I started it late 2017
Uh-huh.
and or summer of 2017 maybe, and then uh when did it come out? Wait, no, maybe I got my timeline wrong. Maybe it's 2016 because it was basically like a year and a half.
That's pretty
So,
impressive. At least that's what I like to.
and that's a year and a half while I'm doing full-time
Full
freelance.
time, yes, yes. That's what I was gonna
So
say.
that's
Because
the yeah.
you were consistent on. I'm at least I was seeing every almost more consistently on social media than you're doing other work, and
Yes.
then you finished a comic book. And I also asked you about that. So a couple of things on RuinWorld.
Yes.
What's the story about?
Okay.
And just for people to get some
Yeah,
context
yeah.
on it. And I'd love
So,
for other people to go and get a copy because I really
oh yeah.
like it.
So, yeah, RuneWorld is essentially a fantasy adventure using anthropomorphic characters, sort of like
Mhm.
DuckTales and that type of stuff. And they essentially this world is. I sort of built this foundation on the idea that at one time this world was full of magic, full of like monsters and the powerful artifacts and things like that. And then there was a period of time where that like everything maybe there was a big war and everybody died kind of thing. And then these creatures that inhabit this earth now or inhabit this world, they start to sort of uncover like through these old temples and old like things. There's this magic that sort of lays beneath the world, and they start to like uncover it. So like there's a lot. It's almost like an industry is built around finding like there's these you're either a rune hunter, somebody who's willing to risk going into an old tomb where there might be a monster laying waiting for you, or skeletons or different things like that.
Right.
You're the risk taker. You're the sort of more of the hero. And then there's scavengers, and scavengers are like, the people that would maybe just go into a battlefield and kind of dig up like, and try to find an old shield and go sell it, or like different things like that. So there's a lot of value in the world, and
Right.
and so I kind of looked at that as sort of like the basis for it. And then it basically was about two characters that find this map that leads to this one treasure that is a very like sort of talked about like in their childhood. They probably hear about this pirate that had he had this like he raised the dead, he was powerful, he accumulated all this wealth and treasure. And so it's a big like it's a big treasure hunt essentially,
Sort of a fantasy adventure as well.
yes, with
Yeah.
monsters and there's a whole like sort of like I don't know, I don't want to get into it too much, but there's like a underbelly of like sort of like black market trading and stuff like that. That's kind of where the villain exists. He's got kind of like a pawn shop that he runs, and it's a whole like he's kind of a bit of a gangster. And so like he hears about the map, and he starts going after these characters to get a hold of this map, and it becomes a whole thing. There's double crossing going on. I tried to sort of make this sort of like when I think of my stories, I visualize them. So I see them as like a movie playing out in my head. Like I see it as a cartoon. That's how I visualize it all. And so going back to kind of what you were asking me earlier, like, the guy pulling the bucket in, like that's just because in my head, I'm like, how does he get from here to here? Because if I'm watching a cartoon,
I
have to
spotted it. That was the thing I was actually trying to describe, because I mean I was able to see that thing sort of play like a little cartoon, right? Like like a movie of sorts, and I was able to relate to that, and it was wordless, which was very fun, because it takes a lot of time for me to like read a comic. Obviously most comics have words, but I wish comics had less words so that I can actually look at the pictures.
Well, Bot 9 is all pictures. So
pictures. I like that. I like that.
Well, yeah, Bot 9 was a great challenge for that, because I sort of in my head I go, can I do this? Like, can I pull off telling a story that actually makes sense without any words? Like, and can I convey this message? And it's neat to hear that you went back to do it, because that's something where like I know the story as I'm drawing it. It makes sense to me. And that was sort of like a weird sort of like, you know, a little bit scary, but a little bit like, you know, exciting. Like I was really curious to see how people were going to see the story. Are they going to get it? Like, you know,
I didn't get it the first time.
right.
I was like, okay, why is this bot going from here to here? Then once I realized it and then went through the book again, every action made sense. Every panel. Oh, wait. I don't want to say it. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it.
No, but it's kind of like this, you know, when you watch those movies like a Sixth Sense. Remember the Sixth Sense?
Right.
That one?
Yeah. I haven't watched it, but I know Bruce Willis is the coach.
Okay, yeah. So that's a type of movie where, like, at the end, you're like, oh, that's why. Because I knew with Bot 9, I knew the ending. That was the thing. I knew that was all I really needed. Like, and that was the kind of the cool thing. It's like, I know the beginning and I know the end, and I just get to fill in the rest. Because the book is really just a journey. But then the journey is like, but why? Like, why is he doing it? Like, because it just goes. Like, that's the fun, like, little thing. And it was almost like that for me as a storyteller, visuals. It was like, I almost liked the fact that I almost didn't know. I knew where he was going to end up, but I didn't exactly know where he was going to go. So that was a fun, you know, kind of thing. And then you start to go like, you know, is the fish controlling the robot?
Oh, please don't say that.
No, but I'm saying, like, you start to go like, what's going on? You start to say, like, you know,
no,
as you're reading the story.
You should. I would keep it under wraps if it was my comic, because I mean that was just
fun to discover.
Yeah, it was really fun. I actually just went through it and then like, oh boy, I didn't even notice that, right? And especially, I really love the part where, I mean, I'm going off on tangents here. We're on RuinWorld. I really I really like the part, you know, with the trains and you were exploring sort of like the countryside, or at least the part where the bot goes into the countryside. It was just lovely. It wasn't something that I've never seen in that particular style before, and I really wished this story was in an animated short film format. You know, that would be really lovely to watch.
Yeah, I had watched. Okay, so I was late to the game for watching Miyazaki movies.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be honest here. I saw Wind Rises. I'm not able to get it. Right, I'm not able to get Miyazaki.
Well, I dove in. I finally decided I'm just going to dive in. I bought like all the Blu-rays. This was like 2 years ago, and I sat down. I watched them all. I was surprised that the films I end up liking more than other films. I didn't know, like, Kiki's Delivery Service was my favorite. And that's something like, as a 43-year-old guy who'd like, like to sort of relate to this girl who's like this young girl who's a witch and build her adventure, like, and stuff, and see that and that to resonate with me was like, I was like, wow, that's just one of those things that, like, I never thought in a million years that I would think that would be my favorite one. Like, Totoro, like, it's a kid's movie and it's great. Like, it's fantastic. Like, I just really got into his storytelling. Like, when you start to see like the way he sees like the world and everything like that, like start like go watch Totoro, like give it a shot.
I watched it actually. I really liked Wind Rises. What I like to think is it speaks to a different part of me which I'm not exactly in touch with, or a part of me that I haven't developed that much of is what I like.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't think I would appreciate these movies in my 20s at all.
Yeah.
I was a different person then. Now I have kids. It's like I think of the world differently,
right?
And I think now seeing it for the first time, it sort of actually was probably better. I waited. So maybe wait. Maybe when you have a kid, you'll be like, oh, like,
yeah.
like these movies speak to me on a different level. Anyway, so that was sort of like watching the Miyazaki movies sort of inspired Bot 9 because of that. I just love the richness of his worlds he created. And that was another thing too, was like creating that Bot 9 world. Like, it made me think about, well, what is this world? Like, I understand sort of the things, but like, like the scene with like the garbage, and stuff like that. Like, understanding like what do these people do in this world to sort of manage what's happening? Like, how do they live, what are the challenges of the world, and that sort of helps sort of, really shape like that story, like the in between. Because like I said, I knew the beginning, I knew the end, but as he explores this world, it really made me have to think about how this world functions, and try to think about that stuff. So that's why Bot 9 was exciting for that, because it was a fun way to sort of like, build this world around this character and build it around his adventure. And yeah, it was a great little like experiment.
So what is your approach actually towards making comics? Making something like Botman and RuinWorld, because I think those two are completely different projects on the scale level, right?
Right.
But what is your approach towards making comics? How do you manage it? How do you do it? How do you get from start to actually finishing it?
So here's
self-publishing it.
Okay, well, let's start. Okay, so the creative process. I wish I had a formula, because it would make my life so much easier. I don't have one. Like I sometimes I'll write a lot of bullet points. Is like a lot of times things start with bullet points of ideas.
Right.
And then those change a lot as I'm going through it. I find that like a lot of times I'll write ideas and then I'll go back, I'll revisit it, and I'll hate it. And then I'll just trash the whole project, because I'm just like, I can't get my head around things. I'm very all over the place creatively. Like, that's why, like, when I have multiple projects going at once all the time, it's almost like I wish I could focus. I wish I could sort of blindly just dive into a project, just figure it out. But I tend to, if I can't necessarily answer certain questions, because I start to ask myself questions when I'm coming up with a story, I start asking, why is this character doing this? And then why, if there's a villain, what's the villain's motivation? If I can't answer those questions, then I go like, I can't do the story right now. I'm not ready. Like, it's not ready. If I can't answer the questions of why, then I need to just, maybe I'll come back and I'll answer the question later, and maybe it'll click. And Bot 9 was, that's how I was able to do it, because I was able to ask why, like, because the why is really important in that story. And if without the why, it's not a story. So, exactly. And so I think that's my approach to comics or storytelling is being able to ask why. Why are they doing this, and having a satisfying answer for that. And if I don't have that answer, then I won't proceed any further. Sometimes though, like I find like maybe if I don't have the why yet, like one of the projects I'm working on right now, I'm trying to figure out the why, but I have made some interesting characters, and I've started to do pose sheets. I'm doing like pose sheets for the characters, some expressions. I do that because the more I do that, I start to know these characters, and then if I know the characters better visually, and then I start to think about them in story sense, and then maybe that'll help answer whys later. So I find like through the art, like because I'm not a writer, I'm a visual storyteller. So yes. I almost need to create the artwork to help like sort of support the writing. And so if I have the visuals, if I have some concept piece, there might be a concept piece that I just do, and I'm like, oh, like this concept piece answers a lot of questions. Right. And the story starts to form around it. And so a little bit like of my process is really just throwing out a bunch of things and then hoping it sparks. Hoping that those little
dots get connected.
And if I can start to connect these dots, then I'll have a story. And so that's kind of, and then other things too. Sometimes I'll start to design something and I'll be like, that's cool. I'll come up with I'll start bullet pointing some ideas. But then later I'll come back and I'll go, do I really want to draw that? Like, that's the thing too. Like sometimes you'll start to like think of an idea and you're like, that's a cool idea, but is that something I want to draw? Like, it might not be like, I have an interesting story for like, a violent vegetable sort of like story where these characters are like killing each other, but they're all vegetables. So like
I saw
it's
the
this real,
concepts for that in your
yeah, and
artwork.
but I couldn't figure out the whys. And then also I was like, do I want to do a violent kids looking comic? Like, so, like that's just what it came down to. It's like sometimes I have to ditch a thing because I'm like, you know what, maybe it's just not what I ultimately want to do. It's a fun idea,
Right. No,
but I'm
yeah.
like, do I really want to draw like because it was almost like the idea was like to do a really dark sort of like story for these vegetables, like to get
I,
dark with it. And it's
I,
fun, but
I saw
I'm
that.
like,
I saw it. Those are clever designs, though. I mean,
right, yeah, it's fun. Like, I
especially
mean,
yeah, the carrot old man, or
yeah, it was
I
it was a
remember that.
mage, a carrot
Yeah,
mage, and like,
carrot page. Yes, actually, I should
um,
put up a picture on screen so that people can actually see there. Uh,
so
so wait, so how do you manage this whole thing? Because there's the I know I'm asking you a lot of
yeah, yeah,
big broad questions, because there's one, your story say design approach that you need to do for during the development phase of your comic.
yes,
Then you're doing multiple projects on the other side. How do you
yes,
manage it on the time wise? How do you get things done? Because one of the biggest
yeah,
things I've seen people is like, at least I see in myself a lot, is like start big projects and drop them,
right.
not finish
Well,
them.
okay, so my method is, so I always try to get my client work done first. So
Hmm.
that's my priority at the beginning of the day. I work on client work, and I'll work on that for either half the day or the full
Hmm.
day, depending on what I got on my plate that day. I
Hmm.
like to I always need to make sure that like my clients have their work done on time. That's
Right.
important because it's unacceptable if I'm handing in things late.
Hmm.
Beyond my control, sometimes things happen and you communicate with your clients. That's important. Keep that line of communication open. If you can't make a deadline, let them
Right.
know why or whatever. But client work comes first. And then I usually use my evenings for my own stuff. I sort of use that time. Like it's
Mm.
like, so like my kids are in bed at that point. Sometimes my wife will watch TV together, and I'll draw on my iPad. I recently got an iPad
Ah.
Pro, so that's been helpful. So
Oh
I
yeah,
can do
I
that.
saw that post. Yes, I remember that.
Yes, so that's been good. And yeah, so like my evenings are mine, and then the weekend I usually try to make parts of my day. I try not to work as much on the weekend, but I still work on the weekend probably 4 or 5 hours during the
Hmm.
day, and then evenings again. Um, and I try to make that time for my own projects if I can. Sometimes it has to be client work because I just have a deadline
Hmm.
that I need to meet, and so that's kind of how I juggle it. It's client work comes first, and then evenings I try to make for myself, and weekends I try to make for myself, and that's where my projects live, or evenings and weekends,
A
and then the
lot of
rest.
a lot of it is simple, huh? Just properly allocating particular amount of time for these things and just
Yeah,
chipping away at it.
chipping away at them and trying not to take on too much, although sometimes it can be. I find as a freelancer, it's sometimes hard to say no to projects, especially if it's a good project. Then the client, like, it might lead to more stuff.
Mm.
You sort of, and the pay is good, and you sort of go, okay, I'll take that on too.
Mm.
um and I can get myself into trouble sometimes doing that because it's just the hours add
Or
up,
just
and
right, yeah,
it becomes intense, and then I have less time for my own work. Part of the reason I started a Patreon account was because I wanted to start generating more income that allows me to take on less freelance. Like, that's sort of the goal, like build
how's
up
that
a Patreon.
experience? How's the
it's
Patreon
been
experience?
Yeah, it's been really positive so far. It's my biggest fear before I started Patreon was I didn't want to necessarily become beholden to it. Like, I didn't
Mm.
want it to be something where I feel it's almost a burden to have. Like, that was my one thing. I was like, I don't want to overpromise that I can't, because these people are paying you, and every month, and they're expecting a certain level of, work coming their way.
True.
And I'm still trying to find a balance, like within it, like of what the Patreon is. I think some people look at it like maybe it's a, how to draw course, but it's not. Like I try not to present it that way. It's more like I'm just going to share more of the behind the scenes work. You get to see the PSDs, like that Vader PSD you saw back in the day. It's like, the art shops I'm doing, I share the whole PSD with people, and they can just have access to my whole file, so they can see those layers, see how it all, see the, have access to that stuff, and I'll do like live draw videos. I try to do them once a month. I've done a draw over video where people sent in their characters, and I did sort of live critique over top, like so they could see, me drawing the volumes I talk about and things like that. Right. So there's an element of learning in there, but I'm not necessarily a teacher. It's not a course. I try not to present it that way, but I think that's the balance. I'm trying to find, like, where's the balance where people feel they're getting something out of it.
You should put one though, You should put out like a course or something.
Well, the problem is I don't really have a passion to teach. So, like I just don't, like, it's just not, and I've been asked by different platforms to do courses and things like that over the years. And I just sort of say, no, this is not for me. Like I like to casually give advice and things like that, but I don't structuring a whole course and doing a whole thing. It's not really, that's more your thing. Like,
I love teaching.
You do a great job at it. Yeah, but you're like, you're really good at presenting and, articulating your ideas, and like, you really, you nail that. Like you have that, I can tell you, like, a teacher's like, mindset.
Genetics, teachers of genetics.
I don't know. Like, I think you need a certain personality. My biggest thing too, when I was in college, because going back to when I said the animation industry had crumbled, we got a lot of veterans coming in to teach, which was great. You're like, oh, this guy's worked on features.
Right.
But this guy doesn't want to teach. He just needs a job. And we had a lot of teachers that ended up like not being great teachers. They were great artists. They were great artists.
That is so big.
But being a good teacher, I think that's why I don't teach, because I don't feel I'm a great teacher. Now, I might be able to give you advice here and there, but like, I'm not a great, I don't think I have that in me. So I think that's why I don't necessarily,
maybe you should do some like drawing advice with Derek Laufman, where you just casually can just give out drawing advice.
And that's sort of, the Patreon sort of allows me to experiment a little bit and do these sort of live draws. I got a live draw coming up this weekend, in the next Saturday, or this coming Saturday, where I'm going to show how I sort of make a character design sheet, like how I take a character design and I do a pose sheet, and I do like some expressions and sort of show people like kind of how I, draw over my own characters to then create new poses, because I do that a lot. Because the animation background, like we used to draw like on like, you draw on light tables, and you'd have multiple pages, and when you're doing your animation, you're drawing on top to make the character move, right? So I always took that sort of as a way to sort of like, if I'm going to take a character design and do a new pose, and I draw over top of my old characters. I almost just like, put it on a layer underneath and make it really light, and then I start drawing my pose on top, so I can keep my volume sort of intact, and I sort of, it helps me sort of create the movement and keep everything kind of still in place. So I'm going to show people how to do that. So like, there's little things like that where I'm still trying to figure out my Patreon, like, a little bit teaching, but a little bit behind the scenes, a little bit of me just sharing stuff that I wouldn't normally, dump on social media, because maybe it's, just something, it's too much. I'm not going to post on social media all day long.
Right.
So.
And you're sort of using those principles of animation to sort of build that up to your drawing, right? I mean,
right. And I think all those principles, like I said, going way back to like when I was in school, and I sort of saw like storyboarding, layout design, all these things, character designs, like how they were able to apply later, like all that stuff ended up being stuff that I could apply later to my comics and my art. It was great. It was actually ended up being a great thing. And I'm glad I took the course because of that. Because that just kind of, it lended itself to everything else. So
That's good. So yeah. So I just want to ask you like a couple of quick, I don't know, rapid fires. I hate those terms.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Try. I'll do my best. I'll do my best not to ramble.
What I'm going to suffocate you right now. I'm going to say sorry for that before, because I'm throwing some big things at you and telling you, oh, you know what, do a rap. That's anyways. So one, if you were to sort of go back in time, right, and you might have heard of this thing, but I'm going to sort of rephrase it in a different way so that you might get a better perspective. So if you were to sort of go back in time, talk to that 21-year-old Derek Laufman, and you have like 10 minutes tops. All you can give is like pointers for the guy.
Yes.
And whatever you say won't affect your current position in where you are in life right now, but it might create an alternate timeline where that Derek Laufman could be like the next, I don't know, ruler of the universe, ruling comics or something. So what would you say in terms of, say, life, art, business, craft, freelance?
Okay.
Let's go with life first.
Okay. Well, life. I'm not too much for life. I think. Yeah, not too much there. I think it mostly relates to art. Like I think I would just, if I had 10 minutes of myself, I would say, you're not as good as you think you are. You need to focus on the fundamentals.
Right.
You need to drop this sort of ego, and if you put in the work now, it'll pay off later. And play less video games, and watch less TV. So those are the things I think, like, those are the things I tell myself. Those are the key things I needed to do that I didn't do when I was in my 20s.
What about work and freelance? What do you do?
Work and freelance. Okay. So I would say you can't force it. Like freelance, you can't force. Like you cannot. I don't think people ask me like, how do I become a freelance artist in this day and age, especially knowing where things are now. Art directors follow people on social media. So you need to create a body of work. Like I've never gone and looked for a job. Every job has come my way, every single one, because of social media. So that's where the social media is important, but it's the quality of work that's there. And I think that's key. So when that art director looks at your work, it needs to be your best work. And that's when the jobs will come. It's not going to come just, they're not handing out jobs to everybody. It's not, it's just not how it goes. It's just, you have to be, it's sort of like when the call comes, you have to be ready. So having those strong fundamentals and being there's and then also like draw, like when you draw for yourself, you'll find that like the work will be better, and if you're drawing what you like, that work will the quality of your work will shine through. And I think that's like, if you're not, sometimes it's like, I mean, you can certainly draw for the job you want. Like that's like, if you want to get into an animation studio as a background artist, well, you better have been practicing background art and drawing the level of quality that you see in an animated movie. If that's where if you want to draw for, Disney, you better be creating Disney level stuff. If you're not creating Disney level, and maybe you don't know, like that's the thing too, like, as a young artist, you might not have the eye yet, like, having that artist eye. Like it took me a long time to develop my artist eye.
Right. That is so true. That is so true.
Being able to see your own flaws, like that's huge. Like that, like hopefully, I don't know if I could have taught myself at 20 to see I don't know if I had the maturity yet. Like I almost needed like art maturity. And I like I said, I matured late as an artist, I think, and I wish as like a teenager I had it. Because I think if I had it as a teenager, if I had more art maturity, and I could see the flaws, I would have improved. But I couldn't. and I think that was a detriment to me, you know, being a late bloomer as an artist.
Anything that helped you develop that? Anything that comes to your mind?
I think that was more, maybe it was because social media and seeing like more art, like seeing the good art and knowing, like, and comparing and eventually understanding. I think that's the thing. Like when I was coming up, social media, and like I said, there was message boards of like people posting stuff, and you could see like this artist was a little bit better than this artist, or this. You start to see, and nowadays maybe that art maturity comes quicker because there's so much art out there to absorb.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, you start to, and if you can really compare, like if you can really have a serious conversation with yourself and say, I can hold my drawing up to this drawing, and do I really understand why my drawing's not here yet?
True.
And if you can understand why you're not here yet, and you can start to understand what you're lacking, that's when you'll make those leaps. And that's going to be huge for like any young artist, is when they can eventually see the flaws, like see where their gaps are and fill those gaps in. That's, that's the biggest thing. So many artists that like, come to me and say like, what do you think of this? Or what do you think? They want your approval, right?
Right.
And it's like, my approval isn't going to help you. You don't need my approval. What you need is that artist eye. You need to develop that, and I don't know how to get you there. Like, I'm not sure how to, there's no magic switch to even turn that on. I'm not sure when you're going to, that artist is going to mature, artistically, and understand and get that eye to see, I'm not sure when it's going to come, but until that comes, I think it's hard to make those leaps. But once you get it, you start to level up, and that's when you see artists level up. And like you'll notice too, like in your art, Kesh, like when you said like when you came to Instagram in 2011, your skills were at a certain level, but there is a point in your art career where you started to get it, and I can see in your art. I can see in your art now that you get it, like you understand. I've seen your development, and I think that's. There probably wasn't necessarily a magic moment. It was a gradual thing
process,
probably because you're studying and you're admiring all this art, and you're trying to like dissect it, and you have that sort of drive to do that. And I think when you're really into it, and it becomes your life, like it's your life. And I think that's the thing. Like you're invested now, like you're an artist, like you are. So like there's no like probably for you that you're not thinking like you might say like, oh, I do entertainment here, but I mean at the core you're an artist.
True.
So
true. Yeah.
And whenever that transition happened where you decided like this is me now, I'm an artist.
Better to be an artist.
I'm gonna build everything else around my art. But you're also like you're taking in the art, you're buying art books, you're watching tutorial videos, you're doing these things that like and you're creating your own. So like that's another thing too. If you have the drive to teach, that's another thing too, because you're analyzing your art, you're analyzing this process, and I think that's making you just focus and pay attention. And that art maturity is you have that early on now. How old are you now?
26, 27.
Yeah. I wish at 26 to 27 I had your art maturity. Like I just like I was 30. I'm 10 years like behind you. You know what I mean? Like in terms of art maturity.
You know what? Actually, I've to that, right? I think it's partly because of, I always say this because I hear this someone telling me that, what, I wish I had that when probably I was around your age. And I think it's because of all the collective, the way you put it is the collective wisdom and knowledge of the people who came before me, who sort of made it easily available for me, so that I was able to grasp that and I was able to do it. And I think the people who are going to be coming after me and you probably 2 or 3 generations later, I think they'll be way better at this point, right? Yeah.
Like, and these people like, like you who do these tutorials and have these art classes, I would have loved that when I was like young artist coming up. Like, it's going to art school and stuff was good, but I mean, you sort of you're when you go to art school, you're there for that time. You better be focused, ready to learn at that moment. And as opposed to like being able to do it in the comfort of your own home,
True.
and do these, you know what I mean? Like the comfort of that, and you can fail like without your neighbor looking at, you know what I mean? Like there was a weird
Mm.
like pressure because your students are around you and they're all really good. And you're like
Mm.
over here going like, oh no, like is my art as good as that guy? Like he's way better than me
Oh,
over
that
there.
that was the first time I discovered Pinterest. I saw Pinterest and all the people who are posting art on that. As a guy who's never seen, I've never gone to art school or had like a proper drawing class before. Seeing that, I was like, holy! First, I actually turned it off because I didn't want to accept that because my ego was too big. Because like you said, right? I was
Mhm.
the best drawing kid in my class, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't want to burst that bubble. And when I
No.
saw these other people who were so good at good, I just shut it off for a while. Then it took some
Yeah.
time for me to like crumble down that ego and just go at it. Like, okay, you know what?
Yes.
Let's learn from
And
them.
that's that art. That's what I talk about, that art maturity. And I mean, it's a good thing you had that at least earlier
Right.
on, like unlike myself, where it took years after that. So yeah, those are key things that like I think, your listeners and stuff probably want to know about,
Last thing, which is
Yeah.
what would be. So I'm assuming you're 40, 41 right now.
I'm 43.
43. All right.
Yeah.
Pushing the big 40. All right. So
Yeah.
what would the 65, 70-year-old Derek Laufman tell you?
Ooh, I'm hoping that he would tell me to make more of my own things, have them, create more of your own stuff. Like I'm hoping that path is, I can look back as somebody who's, later in life and retired, having things that exist in the world that I
Right.
created. Because I mean, when you think about your legacy or as an artist or whatever, to be able to have those properties out there that live on beyond your years, like
Right. Right.
that's a cool kind of
Thing.
thing,
Right.
to leave your mark, if you will. So I think, keep creating. I think, I think that's, hopefully, my older self would say, just keep creating. And eventually, I think about like, I got maybe 20 good years of drawing left before, you know, arthritis kicks in and I can't, or
Oh
whatever, you
boy.
know what I mean? Like, it's weird, but like the clock's ticking, right? And how many projects can I make in 20 years? 10 more books, 10
But
more
that's
Rune
a different.
Worlds.
That's a
That's how I
good
start
way.
to think
Yeah.
now. It's like, how much time do I have left, at this point to create those things? And I try not to dwell on it too much because it gets depressing when you think about it in terms of your life in terms of how many projects do I have left in me. But, that's where Miyazaki's a big influence too, because, here's a guy
Yeah.
who's very,
Very
78 or
old.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's still creating, but he knows in his head, he said in the documentaries I watched with him, he's like, how many more films do I have in me? Like, how many more
Mm.
stories do I have? And that's something like kind of resonated with me, even at my age. It was like, how many of these do I have in me? And so go and do it. Like, how, I don't have that much time. So I'm trying to, think in terms of that, like,
In
and
terms of
put out some
projects.
stuff. Yeah. And like, hopefully, each project I do, like, inspire somebody else. That's the coolest thing too about being an artist, is when you inspire others. Like that's
Mm.
like, it's cool when somebody says, I started drawing because I saw this you draw. Like, you drew this thing and I started drawing and now it's been 5 years and I'm drawing this now and I'm doing like, I mean, that's amazing. Like if you
Speaking,
inspire somebody to go do something, it's amazing.
you know what I'm going to add to that fuel, because speaking of people getting inspired by your work, I know a guy named Sketched Up 20, right? He got
Okay.
here bought 9, right?
Mhm.
He loved it so much, and he made his own 40-page comic. I have
Awesome.
it.
Yeah.
Can I
Show me.
show it to you?
Yeah.
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 He loved this thing. Yeah. This is his comic. So
That's amazing.
I think he's gonna flip out if
That is
you
so cool.
just
I'm gonna check
jump
that out.
Yeah. So
That's amazing.
so
Yeah. And like, do you want to talk about self-publishing? Because I remember you had mentioned it before.
yes.
Okay, so the thing is, if you have so you need a couple things. So you need a website,
Mhm.
some sort of online store. Like when you're going to self-publish, I find that like, having, whether it's a big cartel store, I have a Squarespace website that has a built-in store to it. You just definitely need a platform to push and sell your
Obviously, yes.
thing. Probably having some sort of a following for your product is going to be helpful, because if you only have 100 followers, it's going to be hard to sort of generate any kind of like buzz or anything around your project. I find that a small percentage of your followers will actually buy your stuff. Like that's it. So the bigger following you have, you really got to understand that only a small percentage
people follow. Yeah, right.
are willing to actually give you money for your thing. And that's something to consider.
I learned it the hard way. I learned it the real hard way. Like when I put out my first ever posters, and it was the first time I got them printed. I got the proper poster tubes, and I figured out the shipping and everything. It's like 5 people bought them.
Yeah, no, and that's sometimes how it goes. I'll release like a new print, and it'll I'll sell 3 of them at that time, and then over time, if it's in my store, it'll sell more. But sometimes it's just how it goes. And even I have like 270,000 followers on Instagram. They're not all buying stuff. It's just what it is. So when you're self-publishing, you definitely need the platform. You need the capital to print your stuff. So that's key. There is print on demand. I find though, the print on demand stuff, it's a lot more expensive. And I try to, my thing is I want to make my products as inexpensive to somebody as possible. So we always I try to print, if I'm going to print a book, I try to print at least 1,000 of them so that I can keep the cost of the actual per book down.
So I think that's how you approach it, like in thousands? Or
and I try to do it in thousands. My first art book I printed 500 of, and then I ended up that book was actually small. It was my first art book was actually a mini version of my.
What was it? The art book 1?
Art book 1, yeah. So
not the Excel edition.
No, I had an art book.
I have it. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so you have Excel edition, right?
Yeah, I have the Excel one. Yes, I have the Excel one.
So the first one I ever printed, I think I printed 500 of, and they sold really well. And then ended up doing a Kickstarter to do the bigger one. So that's something too. So having the funds to print the books, I usually go to Kickstarter for that, because I look at it like, if you can't fund it on Kickstarter, it's not worth investing your own money, holding it on your website and hoping people come buy it. Kickstarter is sort of like that thing where at least you'll know, like if you can't hit your goals, then maybe you're not ready. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's just the product that the people aren't ready to buy yet. Like it's like maybe you're, whatever it is you're doing, it's a good testing ground to know. And then you're not investing your money yet. It's that having a promise of people that are going to buy it, and then the Kickstarter ends, and then you get those funds, and you take those funds and you go print the books, and that's that's a great way to do it. And usually for me, like the Kickstarter will fund the printing of the books, but then I still have extra books left over later, and then those are essentially free, like in terms of I didn't, you know what I mean? Because the costs are already paid for. Right. So then the profits come later when I'm selling the books later. You know what I mean? So Kickstarter kind of covers your printing
the first
costs,
couple of books, right? Yes.
And so that's how I kind of look at it when I'm doing, my books and stuff and self-publishing, is I use Kickstarter a lot.
Wait, so that is sort of interesting, because at least what I've done for my courses and my programs, at least, I've always went the route of, say, putting up a campaign or a launch campaign or something that is on my own website, and it is done fairly well. I'm very happy with where it's sort of going. But that's obviously a different product. But I do see other people like 21 Draw, they're doing, say, online programs and online courses and everything on Kickstarter.
Okay.
And have you ever tried doing things on your own, in the sense on your own website? Because I'm assuming Kickstarter takes 5 to 10% of your total.
It ends up being 8%.
8% of the total money.
At least in Canada, it's 8%. I know in certain countries it can be as high as 10.
Right.
depending on what the taxes stuff is. But it's 8%. But really, I mean, you build that into the whatever the goal is. You understand like that. The other thing too is, here's the other thing. If you have a wife who's amazing and will do all your shipping for you, that's key as well. Because I don't touch shipping. She literally does it all. So like anything that gets shipped out, she'll ship out like 750 orders from like Kickstarter, and she's amazing at it. And that's a huge help, because if I was on my own doing this,
that's what Jake said as well. Jake Parker, he
uses his whole family. He's got a whole.
He's got a team. He's got a
team. My kids would just drool on the books and rip them. Hi, my kids. When I watched, I remember there's a video of him. He had like all his kids. He had like 5 kids, and they're all like helping. Right? Yeah. I'm like, what is this magic that he's doing with his children? Because I can't get my kids to
people need to realize that's actually a very underlooked part of making something, right? Shipping and packaging and storing all your books.
Yeah, no, I recently had a conversation with my wife about, when we do our next Kickstarter, I'm like, should we rent a storage unit? Because it's getting to a point where, we store books in the house, and we have like a storage room we sort of set aside, but it's getting full, when my art books now, when I my last art book, I ordered 2,000 of them.
Oh boy, that's
and
heavy.
So it's hard to hold that many books.
Yes.
And of course, like about half of those go out with the Kickstarter, but I'm still holding 1,000 books, and it adds up. Just it's a lot of space. So that's something to consider, but that's later. Like that's when if you're moving that many books, I mean it's a different level of I don't think people starting out self-publishing are going to be necessarily dealing with that unless they've got a huge following, and I would ask, what have you been waiting for? But so like my first art book that I did, that a small version, I only I did like a pre-order and on online, and I set it up on my website. So I didn't do Kickstarter for that first thing, and it did pretty well. Even art book 2, I didn't Kickstart because I was afraid of Kickstarter at the time. I was nervous about going to Kickstarter.
Oh wait, 1 and 2 you did it on your own?
Yes, and then it was art book 1 XL that I did after art book 2.
Right.
It's kind of a weird.
I know.
Because I was like, because I had these 2 books. Yeah,
sorry, talking over you.
I'll show you the 2 books. Here, so this was my first art book.
Right. Oh yes.
Size of bot 9, and it was just. It's got basically the same content in there. It's almost the same size, right?
Oh yeah.
This is what I use actually as a template for bot 9. So I'd done this, and it was a lot cheaper because it was small. It was only, I think it's 5 by 7 or something like that. And so then I had released this one.
Oh yes, I've got it. See,
right, what you got?
I can flash my own copy to Derek.
Wrong side. Right. So now I'm stuck at that point. I'm stuck with these 2.
Right.
And they don't. Right.
You want to make it a set.
Yeah, I want to make it a set. Right. So that's when I was like, okay, I don't know if enough people are going to want to buy art book 1 again. So I was like, well, if I add 50 more pages and beef it up to be 100 pages, the other one was 50 pages, and then I make it the same size, then I start having a set, and now it starts to look, and then so that was where the Kickstarter, because I was afraid of printing art book 1 again. I was afraid that maybe not people are going to buy it, and then they bought it, and it was great. So I bought
the bundle. I mean, I got the books.
Oh
the bundle.
Yeah.
It was
with
fun.
art book 3. Yeah,
that was actually the first. That was actually the first time I ordered from someone outside the country, because shipping is expensive from like the States to here. It's like almost the same as the book's price, but I still get them. I don't mind at this point.
Well, that's part of the key too. Like I found like with doing self-publishing is that we try to keep our shipping costs as low as possible.
Mm.
Having my wife be able to do them and ship them out of our house is sort of key to that. Like some people use a service like to
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
to house and ship their books, and it becomes so expensive. Like so many times I've even like I'm in Canada and I'll go to kickstart something in the States, and the book's $20 and the shipping's 25. And I'm like, just can't like, I'm like, how is that?
Mm.
Like,
Yeah, I
I
know.
understand. And sometimes it's because they're using a service and the service charges you know what I mean? And it's less obviously work for them. But at the same time, like I kind of go like, I don't know, it's already US dollars. It's, it's going to cost me 45 instead of 20,
Hmm.
and so and I try to, when I'm doing my stuff, I try to keep the costs as reasonable as possible because I don't want those people to look at the price of shipping and go, I don't want it.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
you know
Yeah.
what I
Right.
mean? And
Right.
it's
Right. Right.
definitely more challenging for international because, the shipping prices to India or, um, Brazil and different places like, it can get really expensive. And
Expensive.
so,
Yes. That's
we
sort
try.
of because of the lack of proper outlets, or I mean transportation. This sort of between the thing that is one.
Yes.
Would you still go to Kickstarter if you had the capital to print all the
Yes.
1,000 books?
Yes,
Yeah, you
yes,
would.
because I find that Kickstarter, there's a certain amount of people that are not fans of mine that discover the book.
All
Probably
right.
about, I'd say
Right.
about 30% of the of
Uh-huh.
the of the people are people that didn't follow me before and just saw it on
Oh,
Kickstarter. So
wow.
there's a whole market there in Kickstarter, people that are willing to buy things that hopefully discover your stuff through Kickstarter. So I look at it like a marketing tool. So
How,
that eight,
sorry, go on. Go on. Sorry.
I was gonna say that no, I was gonna say like the 8% you lose to Kickstarter,
Mm.
but like I get 30% more
More
sales. So
right.
it balances out. Like in the end of the day, it ends up being, you know, profitable.
I was gonna ask, like, do you do paid Facebook advertising? And I'm getting into
I
the.
haven't.
You haven't?
No, I haven't. It's I know there's services and you get
Right.
bugged a lot. Like, I mean, when I do a Kickstarter campaign, they all come out of the woodwork the second you have a campaign up of like all these
Oh
people
yeah.
promising. Yeah, they just like you get spammed constantly, just like during your campaign of just like,
Oh, I don't know.
kickbacker and back this thing and do, all these different things. And I haven't done any of that stuff. I just, because they take a big chunk
Ah.
and so it makes me a little bit weary. I think they take like 50% of your sale,
Ooh. Oh
something like
boy.
that. I know Will Terry talks. Do you know Will Terry?
I know. I was just going to ask you because Wilter, I think he did some sort of a collaboration with for
Yeah, yeah.
his recent book.
Will was great for like just giving information about, sharing that information about his whole process and numbers and things like that is really helpful. Like hearing him talk about that stuff he had
Yeah.
on his YouTube channel and stuff.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and just it sort of made me go, oh, I don't know, like, um, you know, I wonder, like I did definitely wonder. I'm like, if I used the service, would it
Hmm.
end up being better in the end, or would I end up losing? And it's a
I,
gamble where I'm like, it sort of works. I'm okay. Like I sell enough currently
right.
that I'm okay. I'm okay not
Using
giving
it.
this other company money to potentially like, whether they're gonna give me more sales or not. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Nothing
It
justifies
might depend on the
50% though,
product.
right? No, true.
Yeah,
You're
like
right.
I
Nothing
mean,
justifies that. No, sorry, keep on. I don't know,
no.
some weird thing with the connections like lower, slower. I mean, nothing justifies 50%. I mean, like, what do you, what, I don't, yeah, I can't even
I
think of
think I
any.
think it's like they get 50% of the people they bring to your campaign. It's a weird thing.
Oh,
So it's like, but still, like, I mean, for me, I don't build that much profit into my Kickstarter. So it's like I'd be losing money per sale that they bring in because I don't.
right.
I keep my margins as close as possible because I want the book to be affordable for people. So I don't have a lot
Uh-huh.
of room. There's not like I have a whole bunch of profit built into my Kickstarter, you
Right,
know.
right, right.
And So like when I do the Kickstarter, like I'll do commissions and stuff, and I'll that's more where the profit comes from, because I might do like, 20, 25 commissions during that Kickstarter, and then that becomes profit that I earn
Way better
from the Kickstarter. But really, I'm just trying to generate enough money to cover the costs of my books. And then once you have the books, at least you have a tangible thing that you can sell on your website. And then, I can take it to conventions, when eventually we can go to conventions again. And, yeah. So, there's definitely like having the product, I think, is key. And that's kind of what, when I think about building more art books and building more graphic novels, is I want to have more product, in hand that I can sell. And that's like, ends up being more, I like just passive income. As my career gets, I want more passive income. So I have to work less to make the same amount of money. That's kind of the goal, right?
Very true. Very true. And from what I've known with those people, I don't know, I've heard of the business models of these Backstarter. I mean, the people who partner with you on the Kickstarter campaign. I then think that the process is sort of very simple if you sort of know how to do it, in the sense that they say make some assets and create some sort of A/B testing on paid advertising, and and what they do is they see what works and they just boost that. And out of that audience, I think you would be better off if you actually did that yourself. You would actually get way more.
Right. Yeah. If I had the wherewithal to do all that, it would be nice.
Yeah. I can tell you, I don't do it myself. I mean, I do run ads, but I don't do it by myself. I'd rather have someone else do it for me, because I don't understand it. I don't, I know what I can sort of understand people's attention and how to sort of tell stories with that attention or within that attention, but I really don't understand any of that. The ads on Facebooks and Instagram part. Yeah,
no, it's very confusing. Like, it's a whole thing that I don't even try to wrap my head around. But one thing I just want to say about self-publishing, I get this asked the question a lot. People like, how do you self-publish? And it's like, it's literally just making the product and selling it. Like there's no, I think people maybe have a misconception that you need permission or you need some sort of like thing. Like, I mean, it's so much easier nowadays to just make a thing and sell a thing. Like, it's never been easier.
True.
So like, as long as you have the platform to sell it and you have the means to create it, then you have your own self-published thing, whatever it is, whether it's prints or original artwork or making books. As long as you can make it, there's no like barrier. Like, if you're going to a printing company, they'll take your money and they'll print your, you know what I mean? They're not, they don't care who they're selling to. They'll make it. And, I'd say too, like if you're going to, get into your own printing, do a bit of research, find, that was sort of a bit of a hurdle at the beginning, was finding like pricing, like, researching, communicating with people, trying to get, an idea of how much it's going to cost per unit, understanding like where your profit margins are. Like I sort of look at it like, if I'm going to print something, I want to at least charge double what the cost is. At least that's like a bare minimum. So if like something costs me $5 to print, I at least have to charge $10 for it.
All right. Yeah.
That sort of idea, because you need to be able to, and then you want to increase that margin, like, so,
and that's the least amount that you're talking about, actually.
That's the least amount. But, if you're, say, going to want to, like, say there's an art studio or an art store that wants to take your books, they're going to want to sell it for, a certain amount of money and make money off this product. So if you're at a point where you're going to say, take your art books to a store, if that product costs you $5 and you want to make at least $5, that means like you're going to have to sell it to the art studio for like 10, and then they're going to turn around and they're going to want to make double. So they're going to want to sell it for 20. So in hindsight, if something costs you $5, you should price it around 25 bucks.
Right.
So that's an important thing if you're building a product, is to sort of think about the margins, think about
understand like, where the profit is built in.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of like, I never had a business background, but
Mm-hmm.
Understanding the basic economics of what you're doing is important, because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot later. That's like, a lot of people run into problems with Kickstarter where they didn't do their research. They didn't know how much it's going to cost to ship to ABC around the world. They didn't know that they have to buy boxes. They have to buy like bubble wrap. They have to, put the time
All those
in,
little things, right? Oh yeah.
yeah. Like,
True, true.
we because we had a larger volume of shipments, we had to buy a label maker to make the labels, to shipping labels, and little things like that, like, and that thing's $400. Like, so little things like, that add up. It's important to do your research
Mm-hmm.
ahead of time before you self-publish, and just understand the costs that can go into it. Yeah, ask people. Like, that's the best way too. Find somebody who's done a successful campaign. Ask them what pitfalls, what things should I be looking out for. That's been key as well. Is just, sharing of information
Mm-hmm.
is helpful. The more, if I've made a mistake, hopefully you'll avoid that mistake,
All right.
kind of thing. And
I'm actually I'm gonna be asking you soon though.
yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Anytime. Like, just, feel free to, hop on a
I,
call and ask me something.
I'd love to. I'd love to. I've just stuff finally, and after falling on my face for like a lot of time trying to make a comic book,
Yes.
like I just went haywire the first time and like try to make this big project and just like failed miserably. And I built myself up like over the years to like doing mini small projects. I'm like finally at a time like looking at bot 9, like I want to make a 40 to 60 page comic. I just want to get that thing because it's lovely. All these things are right at the end of the day. It's just so
When
beautiful.
you get to hold something that you've made, it's such a cool feeling. Like, honestly, like, I don't think anything satisfies me more like than holding at something I've made.
Yeah.
And just look like, and just flipping, like, I'll flip through my own. I'll be like, I made, like, it's almost like an out of body experience, to be honest. Like, I'm like, did I make this thing? Like, it's almost, it doesn't register that way, but there's a certain amount of pride you have when you've created something, and you hold it and you're like, wow, like, this is something. And then when people buy it, you're like, this is like, that's everything. Like, really, at the end of the day, like, you create art because you want others to enjoy it. And when people are willing to put their money down and like buy that thing from you because they like your art that much, like, that's huge. Like, that's as good as it gets.
Thing. Right. Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day. So yeah, like, making your own things is great. Like, it's something I encourage. But at the same time, like, the fan art and all that stuff might get you there, so maybe it's not,
it's a stepping stone, isn't it? I mean, all those things.
And it might be that, like, sometimes, like, it's not necessarily fan art, but if you're, somebody who decides to like do your own twist on things and be unique, like you had said early on in this podcast, like having your unique spin, having a certain level of quality to that thing. If you can create something that starts to like get buzz and you see people reacting to it, like, maybe that's something where you go, hey, I'm going to dive into this a little more, like, whatever it is. And, don't be afraid to lean into something and kind of, really explore it and see, maybe that people are responding to it. So, it's, but yeah.
Just
I don't know where I was going with that.
If you look at it actually throughout this entirety of this podcast, I think we just went from one, obviously you doing other things, then being able to sort of work on your craft, how to work on your craft, and then how to make something, then how to put your work out there. And then we just went from that to making projects and then to putting that project out there. I think we just went through entire cycle. Yeah, right. Entire cycle of the whole thing.
The other thing too is, like, I think I would end with like, there's no one single path. That's one thing I've learned, like, talking to other artists and stuff. Everybody's path is different. Like, almost, you know what I mean? Like, everybody's got their own unique path. And so there isn't that one thing that's going to work for everybody. You certainly, I think you need to cherry pick like what, this artist is doing, what this guy's doing, what this, and you formulate the things that work for you, because everybody's situation is different. everybody's financial situation, like where they might live in the world. They might have access to different things. Like, so I think it's like, it's important to sort of see, where are people successful, and it's really like a lot of just like taking little ideas, trying things, failing. Like I failed so many times, like, it's like you fail at those things and then eventually you start to figure it out, and, you have some successes, but you'll take a couple steps forward, you'll take a step back, it's like sometimes you'll take 10 steps back, but then you'll get back into, and like you said with your comic, right? Like you started with your comic and you maybe didn't, it was too big, and it was and then you're like, okay, that didn't work, but my next thing, I learned from that like, that doesn't work for me, but then I saw this artist do this and that clicked, so maybe I'll do that. Like, that's kind of what it's all about, is just sort of, paying attention, seeing what other people are doing, and try to take and steal little bits of like information from other people.
True,
and,
right? Yeah.
You learn from each other. I mean, that's how we evolve, and I think that's where the,
everyone
these conversations are important.
This is so true. I mean, do you know the box office artist? He's on YouTube. He does these highly technical pen drawings. And he makes entertaining videos as well. Very charismatic, talented guy. He told me a very good piece of advice when I was actually making the comic. He told me, like, don't think too much about it. Like, just finish it. It's your first comic. At that time, I didn't have that maturity to understand that this is not the be all and end all thing, right? I was trying to put all my eggs in that one basket, and I was trying to tackle this very big project, thinking that, that zero to hero story is possible. And when I fell flat on my face, then I was able to realize that actually the zero to hero story is possible, just not in a couple of months. It'll take probably decades, right? Right. Lots of mini projects and mini things, doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that, like building myself slowly. And it took like 2.5 years or so. I don't know what, 2018, yeah. 2 years or so, I've just been like constantly working towards, like, because one of the things, right, I've at least noticed in myself and other beginner artists who are like really starting out, is like their inability to actually start projects and finish them and be able to sort of stick with part of the problem is also the current age where instant gratification is actually way more or rewarded, right? That's way more rewarded than, it's like hard to stick with something that is so hard, that is so big, right? And you don't get to see the reward quickly. It's probably at the very end of the tunnel, and that's like a question, maybe, oh wait, what if I make this comic, put so much time into it, and 5 people buy it, right? So all those things mixed with that, you never see these highly sophisticated, well thought projects. At least I don't see them, right? Among my circle of YouTube artists or people who are on YouTube, making content on YouTube and trying to improve their craft as well. So yeah, I mean, that's what I've learned. Like the whole thing is like, you got to work yourself up slowly and all these conversations, right? These things help clarify the thought, right? I mean, it helps to sort of understand, and then that's why I like doing these podcasts. I love doing these podcasts because I hear something over and over again. And also I speak something which I normally don't say, which sort of clarifies the thing that we're thinking about, right? Does that happen to you?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't do a ton of podcasts, but like I find like having those conversations with other artists and stuff are important, because it does, you sometimes have to it's almost like you just have to remind yourself, right, of these things. Like it's sort of, you almost have to repeat these mantras. Like one of the biggest key things that I used for RuinWorld and Bot9 was Jake Parker has a simple mantra where he said, "Finish, not perfect." And that, for me, like, I mean, I don't know if he realizes how powerful that was to hear that, because that would changed everything. That little mantra. Because it was so much more important to finish something because I realized, using that mantra, and as I was making RuinWorld and as I was making Bot9, or those type of things, like, I know that like, this is not going to be the best work I've ever done, but it'll be, as long as I'm happy enough, The next thing I make will hopefully be better. And that's kind of how I sort of approach these things. It's like, just get it done. And that's the key. And then sometimes you'll go back and you'll refine things. Like you can, once it's done and you have, like, say you have your 50-page comic, you can go back and you can edit. Like, it's nobody's stopping you. Like, go back and redraw that page or redraw that pose or do that thing or change that dialogue or change this little thing. Like, but if you had it, like, having it done is so much less daunting than if you're like looking at this giant, huge open project that like you half finished over here. That's like impossible. So it's like, it's just almost like, just get it done. Even if you did like, if you did your whole 50 pages and you just did the entire thing rough and did rough dialogue,
right?
If you could start to visualize your whole project in one shot, that's you will get that project done way quicker than if you just go one page at a time.
Meaning visualize it at one shot. What do you mean by
that?
Like,
so I'm saying, like, say you did rough layouts for your entire project.
Right. Okay.
So you have your 50 pages and you rough laid out, like stick figures even. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Like, as rudimentary.
Right. Okay.
Having a big vision. It's like how when they create an animated movie, you have storyboards, rough storyboards. They put them all on the wall and you see the entire story. And that's how because they're visual people and they see their entire movie on the wall. You know what I mean? And being able to see the entire thing, it's but that's, if you're just worrying about finishing it over it being perfect, then you go back and you refine. So it's like, finish the thing. It's not really finished. It's just finished to a point and then refine it. And then, so it's like that can be huge. But
that is good. That is actually, the way you put it was really nice. Sort of finish it, and then you can maybe refine it and then properly finish it. Right, but finish 100%. It though. At the end of the day, it's got to be finished, because it's unfinished. It's no good. Like, I mean, it's only going to get you so far if you have an unfinished project. But finish the thing, and maybe at the end of your finished thing, you're like, this doesn't work. But I think you'll learn so much more just getting through the process. Because all of what we do is a process. I mean, there's very few artists out there that can just draw the perfect drawing without anything underneath. There's a couple, and they're kind of like magicians to me a little bit. They look like they're creating magic. You see them and you're just like, I don't know how you did that, but most of us need to create steps. So it's all about steps, right? So, creating those things, understanding there's steps involved, and, and I think that's just the, finishing things is so important, and then being able to refine, or just move on. Sometimes it's just that, you might recognize, like, okay, I finished this. It's as good as it's going to get. I don't really feel like refining it, but I'm going to go move on to the next thing. But you've learned something from finishing, whether it's just finishing a drawing, the artist who maybe is at the stage where he just, or he or she just sketches in their book and they don't really finish their drawing. Like, maybe if they finished it, got it to a certain level, they'd learn something, and then they'll move on to the next thing. If it's just all scribbles, you might not. You know what I mean? No, I get it. No, I get it. I think that the first phase, at least get a rough version of it out, so that we can actually get a bigger picture of what that thing is, and then we'll have, say, better clarity. Or else it's just a lot of things that's going on in here, like a lot of mumbo jumbo stuff that's going on. Oh, I want to do that, I want to do this, and at the end of the day, nothing gets done.
100%.
Great, Derek. So is there anything else that you want to say? What would you want to say to the people who are listening to this?
I think I just reiterate, like, to all the young artists out there, fundamentals. Like, that's key. Like, that's something that I think every young artist needs to focus on. And no matter what you're going to do with art, focus on those fundamentals. Find the online courses. There's plenty of stuff out there now that's free content or not very expensive content, for the online stuff. Take advantage of those things, and, really just sort of build up your base as you go, and it'll get you so much farther. That's what I would say to people, like, right now. Like, that's key.
And from what I got from this, from what we've talked so far, and take that knowledge and put it into effect, make a project, put it out there, finish it, and repeat that process for a couple of decades, and I think we're good. You'll be where
exactly.
Derek Laufman is in like 20 years.
Exactly. It is, yeah, there's no, yeah. And I said the last thing, there's no quick fix. Like there's there's the art, like, any craft you do, like whether you're a musician, artist, learning to, build a bricklayer, whatever it is, like whatever you do in life, like there's no, like, here's just how you do it and it's done. Like, even if you work at a part-time job, like, at a fast food restaurant, when you first start, you're horrible at it, but 6 months, a year into that job, you're the best cashier there is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's time, like, right? Everything you do takes time. Like, it's just, and art and anything. Like, so I think people hope that there's going to be this magical thing that you're going to teach them. Like, there's the right brush, or there's the right program, or there's the right tool. And it's really, that's not exactly how it is. It's time. It's time and it's effort. And, it's, and that time and effort will vary based on if you decide to do fundamentals at the beginning and learn those fundamentals. Your time will actually be less than the guy who decided not to do that, like myself. And I think that's the difference. You'll see the young artists that you see out there that are amazing. It's because they spent that time doing the right stuff, focusing on the fundamentals, learning the right way, and then they got better faster than somebody like myself. But learn from my mistakes.
And you say you're bad at teaching. Jeez. You just sound like a motivational speaker right there.
Yeah.
And what you said was so true. So true. Derek, thank you so much. I mean, I got to tell you, I didn't even expect this for us to sort of go this in depth. I loved it. Like, I
had a great time. It was
so good. Awesome. It was so good. And I'm so glad to actually have finally, met you. So I didn't meet you. I wish to meet you. Like,
one day, who knows?
One day,
the world opens up again.
Yeah, I want to come out there actually sometime. Hopefully, if I do that,
Canada's pretty awesome. For sure.
I'd definitely do that. I'd definitely do that. And that is it, folks, with this episode of the Skeshbook podcast. Thank you for tuning in. That's a very typical cliche way to say it. Anyways, go check out Derek's works. All the links for his website, Instagram handle are down below in the description. You can go and check him out on Instagram at Derek Laufman. And also go to his website, dereklaufman.com, and check out his shop. I have a bunch of art books from his shop, and also 2 of his comics. I'd highly recommend, that's something that needs to be in your library because it's just a lovely piece of art in general. And 2, speaking of fundamentals, right, we have a free course on drawing fundamentals from Drawing Camp down below in the description. It's a 7-day course. It will help anyone who's who wants to start drawing but don't know where and how to start, and also for people who are already have been drawing for like a couple of years but they have never even given a thought to their fundamentals. This is like a fantastic place to start. It's free. It's 7 days long. Go check it out. Links are down below the description, the Begin Drawing course. So that is it for this episode. I'll see you in the next one. Have a nice day. Be good. Be nice. Make some good work and have a good life. Bye-bye.